She was just another face in the background, the woman who pushed a mop across endless corridors, unseen and unimportant. At least, that's what everyone believed. Then came the moment when the general's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding, the kind of order that belonged to a different era. And in that instant, the janitor dropped her mop handle, snapped her body to rigid tension, and answered like she had been trained for it all her life. The room fell into stunned silence. Security froze mid-step. Officers who thought they had seen everything stared like they were witnessing a ghost. It wasn't part of any drill, wasn't something rehearsed. And that was the exact second they realized this woman wasn't who she pretended to be. She wasn't supposed to exist. What followed didn't align with any handbook or chain of command. It went beyond clearance, beyond classified. It belonged in shadows. Stay with this, because the story that unfolded wasn't written for public eyes. It wasn't built for open daylight. This is a kind of account whispered behind closed doors, filed away in the archives where only the most dangerous secrets live. The first mistake, or the first anomaly, depending on how you look at it, happened at the gate. A technician, pale and trembling, muttered it should never have opened. He repeated it over and over, like the words might undo what he had seen. Military gates don't swing wide for janitors. Not without credentials, not without a biometric scan. And certainly not at 1:47, in the dead of night. But the cameras didn't lie. The woman appeared on screen, tank top clinging to her frame, cargo pants dusted with bleach stains, boots worn from years of use. She pushed a red mop bucket as if it were the most ordinary night shift in the world. Except this wasn't ordinary. She didn't swipe a badge. She didn't wait for a guard. She walked straight through. The scanner tried to read her, then glitched. The feed flickered, scrambled, and finally blinked access granted. But the clearance it logged didn't belong to anyone alive. The code matched an operational clearance decommissioned back in 2011, a file marked dead protocol retired. It wasn't just a scanner. Deeper logs revealed layers of code that didn't exist anywhere in the registry, not in the archives, not in Centrivex, the facility's AI that monitored everything down to the heartbeat of its staff. When the automatic incident report was generated, the system itself rerouted it to cold storage. No alerts, no oversight, no traceable record. And then, 3 minutes later, the file was deleted by someone with Omega-level clearance, the highest there was. Officially, that file ceased to exist. Unofficially, a copy survived. Not in the server, not in the chain of custody, but on a single drive clutched by a junior technician with shaking hands. Something in his gut told him to back it up. He resigned the next morning and never came back. The only thing he left behind was a note scrawled on the back of his badge. Raven 09 walked through the walls. Command tried to bury the anomaly under words like glitch, systems error, janitorial luck, but none of those excuses explained what came next. Because when she entered the war room, the highest-ranking office in the facility, the general himself froze. His eyes widened, his words faltered, and the room turned still. And then, when he barked a command no one else recognized, the cleaning lady obeyed instantly, like a soldier trained under a doctrine long since erased. She wasn't some ordinary worker. Her name, though it wasn't supposed to surface, was Kasha. She carried herself like a shadow in human form, blending so deeply into the background that no one questioned her presence. She moved with the weightless rhythm of routine, mops swishing, bucket wheels squeaking, her hair tied back in an uneven knot, sweat streaking her shoulders, a smear of bleach across one boot. To most, she was invisible. The officers mocked her behind her back. Bit much for a janitor, isn't it? One whispered, she ex-military? Or just try to play the part? Another muttered with a laugh, tank tops regulation tight. Maybe she's hoping someone bumps her up to cafeteria duty. Their chuckles echoed down the corridor, but Kasha didn't break stride. The words slid off her like water striking Kevlar. She kept walking, unbothered, eyes fixed ahead. The mop bucket rattled along the floor, a steady drumbeat that drowned their mockery. She didn't pause until Corridor 6B, the restricted passage leading toward Hall Omega. According to schedules, no janitorial detail was assigned there before 0700 hours. Yet Kasia stood there at 0532, hand steady on her mop handle, expression carved from stone. Inside, voices murmured. Officers prepping an early simulation. Through the sliver of a half-open door, Kasia glimpsed glowing projections across the wall. A tactical map blinked red at the northern flank. She studied it for less than a second, her eyes sharp. The retreat routes were reversed. The wind patterns misaligned. The map funneled every soldier into a death trap. She didn't comment. She turned her head and prepared to move on. But someone noticed. Captain Ashford, early 40s, trim uniform, practiced posture. He had been rehearsing his lines when his gaze landed on the janitor's paws. He saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes. The second too long she lingered. It was the kind of pause that didn't belong to a cleaner. Before he could step forward, chaos intervened. A supply crate, overloaded and mishandled, tilted off a cart and careened toward the ground. Kasia reacted instantly. Her arm shot out, bracing the weight before it hit. She pivoted, dropped to one knee, shifted her stance, and corrected the fall in one smooth, controlled motion. No hesitation. No wasted effort. Ashford stared, frozen mid-breath. The crate wasn't light. The motion wasn't luck. It was training, ingrained muscle memory. His eyes narrowed as he noticed something else. A faint black design curling out from beneath her tank top strap. Not random ink, but deliberate, jagged lines, the edge of a unit crest or a coded marking. She stood, rolled her shoulders, adjusted her grip on the mop handle, and carried on as though nothing had happened. The officers inside Hall Omega were already loud with ego, debating scenarios and strategies before the briefing even began. Kasia pushed her bucket straight through the double doors. She wasn't scheduled to clean the hall yet. She didn't have clearance to step inside. But no one stopped her. Not because she belonged, because no one thought she mattered. Then Captain Bell opened his mouth. "Careful, gentlemen. Tactical footwear incoming," he said, voice carrying across the room, smug and mocking. Laughter rippled through the ranks. Kasia didn't flinch. She didn't smirk, didn't frown, didn't break her stride. Tank top, boots, mop bucket. Moving as if their laughter never existed. And that's when everything began to unravel. Must have been laundry day out in the civilian world. That's what he said, raising his paper cup in a mocking salute as she passed. The word slid across the room, picked up like a bad tune. Somebody else chimed in. She's not even wearing a badge. Another voice joined. Maybe she thinks this place is a gym. Laughter trickled out, cheap and shallow, like lukewarm coffee spilling over the edge of a table. Kasia didn't react. She just pushed her mop bucket to the far side of the war room and began unpacking her tools. The smell of synthetic leather, stale energy drinks, and overworked circuitry filled the air. Projectors whirred overhead, glowing maps already in play. Aides typed murmured, shuffled papers. And not one of them. Not a single polished officer in a press uniform. Imagine that the woman with bleach stains on her boots and a mop handle in her hand might be listening to every word of the strategic debate. Captain Bell wasn't done. He never was. He sipped his coffee, tilted his head toward her. "Hey, you janitor lady." Kasia didn't glance up. "You realize this is a restricted briefing, right? As in extras not welcome." Still silence. "What?" She mute. Bell said, letting the words float like bait into the air. "She's cleaning," muttered a younger lieutenant, half embarrassed to even acknowledge it. Bell ignored him. He leaned forward. "Or maybe she's lost. That it? Did you wander away from the mess hall, sweetheart?" Kasia finally looked at him. Just a second. Just one clear, unwavering stare. Not hostile. Not shy. Not angry. Empty. A gaze stripped clean of expression, like a wall that had no cracks for him to push through. Bell blinked. Felt it hit him colder than a draft from a bunker door. Then she turned away, pressed the mop handle down, dragged it across the tiles in a perfect arc, slow, methodical, controlled. The laughter cut short when General Gerald Stratton entered the room 30 seconds later. He didn't walk so much as command the space by existing in it. For stars gleaming, shoulders square with the kind of certainty that comes only after decades of surviving battlefields and boardrooms alike. Stratton was the kind of man the press worshipped, the kind brass feared, and subordinates cursed in silence. A tyrant, a strategist, a legend. Pick your word. All of them fit, depending on the decade you asked about. He didn't smile. He never did. He scanned the room, the way a hawk scans a field, finding every weak spot without trying. His eyes moved from Bell, then to Kasia, then back to Bell. "Captain," he said. Bell straightened so fast his coffee nearly sloshed onto his boots. "Yes, sir." "What's protocol when an unauthorized civilian steps into a war room, Sim?" Stratton asked. Bell swallowed. "Immediate notification and removal, sir." "And did you notify anyone?" Bell glanced at Kasia, then back to the general. "No, sir. I assumed." "You assumed wrong." Stratton's voice never rose. It didn't need to. Silence snapped over the room, like a trap closing. Then Stratton turned toward Kasia. He studied her for a beat longer than anyone expected. His words came clipped final. "Carry on." And that was it. He walked past her, up to the front of the room, tapped the projector controls, and began. Kasia kept mopping. But something had shifted. The officers no longer laughed. The air itself felt heavier, as though Stratton's acknowledgement had dragged an invisible weight into the room. Bell, suddenly aware how dry his throat was, found himself unable to look anyone directly in the eye. Stratton was old school. No slideshows full of glossy bullet points. No polished briefings with soundtrack-ready crescendos. Just a battlefield map projected wide across the wall, his laser pointer in one hand, and his permanent scowl set like stone. The sim displayed a deep insertion op in contested territory. The mission? Pull a downed asset out under threat of encirclement. Kasia didn't need to stare. One glimpse, and she knew. She'd seen this before, not in theory, not on a screen, but in the dust and fire of Hellman Province. The same ridge lines, the same false exits, the same inevitable outcome. Only here it was relabeled Zone Theta. Stratton barked across the room. Why did this unit collapse in 6 minutes flat? Several officers leaned forward. Bell seized a chance to claw background. He straightened, gestured toward the map. "Sir, from what I see, the lead element pushed too far past the tree without full drone recon. They stumbled into an ambush." "Wrong!" Stratton snapped, cutting him clean. His laser pointer stabbed at a faint ridge line. This terrain channels movement. Overextension isn't possible. They were funneled deliberately. Whoever scripted the scenario understood how to bait an entire unit. His voice darkened. This wasn't operator failure. This was a command-level miscalculation. Kasia blinked. The same mistake. The same logic. History playing on loop, dragging new lives into old graves. "Captain Bell," Stratton pressed on. "You're still treating this like a sterile exercise. Nothing clean about combat. Now, show me your extraction point, assuming hostile air." Bell hesitated, scanned the map, tried to sound confident. "Northwest Ridge looks viable, sir." That's when Kasia exhaled. Not loud, not theatrical. Just a sharp breath through her nose, unintentional, like a reflex she couldn't choke back. Bell's head turned, slow and deliberate, toward her. "Something funny to you, Miss Mop?" His voice cut louder this time, performing for the room. Kasia didn't answer. "No." Bell smirked, trying to recover ground. "Because I'd love to hear the janitorial perspective on extraction under fire." Eyes shifted across the room. Curious, anxious, expectant. Kasia looked straight at Bell. Calm, even, silent. Stratton folded his arms, said nothing, letting the silence sharpen into a blade. Then Kasia spoke. "If the Northwest Ridge is hot, extraction collapses. Not viable without smoke cover layered with elevation drop. You're forcing evac straight into sightlines. Might as well light flares and wait for body bags." The room froze. She didn't raise her voice, didn't lather it in defiance. It came out precise, clipped, like snapping a switch into the correct position. Stratton tilted his head, studying her. "That's correct." A ripple of murmurs broke out, low and nervous. Bell flushed crimson, forced a shaky grin. "Well, I guess someone's been watching too many YouTube vids." Kasia turned back to her mop, silent, but Stratton wasn't done. "Captain," he said, voice flat as concrete. Bell stiffened. "Sir." You just got outmaneuvered by someone with no rank, no badge, and no assigned purpose here. Stratton's eyes cut sharp, which makes me question whether she shouldn't be in this room or whether you should. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating. Kasia wrung out her mop, water sloshing into the bucket, the sound landing like punctuation on the general's words. Bell's smirk evaporated, his swagger gone. The balance of the room had shifted, and everyone knew it. Stratton's eyes stayed fixed on the projected map. "Reset the simulation," he ordered. His tone was sharp but steady. "Now assume the enemy knows the terrain better than you do." The holodeble hummed as it rebooted, bathing the chamber in a dim blue glow. A fresh grid unfolded, digital ridges stretching across the surface, streams running like veins, scattered with pulsing red dots marking hostile signatures. The atmosphere thickened as the officers leaned forward, tablets ready, waiting to take their roles again. "Parameters change," Stratton said. "Double enemy strength. Comms blackout. No satellite support." A few officers exchanged uneasy looks. Someone at the back groaned under their breath. Stratton ignored it. "Adapt or die," he muttered, pacing with his arms locked behind him. "This is where we find out who still thinks like soldiers and who just attends meetings." At the edge of the room, Kasia had pushed her mop and bucket back against the wall, pretending disinterest. She leaned against a column, arms loosely crossed, gaze lowered. Yet every flicker of the combat hologram burned into her mind with precision. She counted blips, tracked elevations, noted supply distribution errors already appearing. Her face was unreadable, but she was calculating everything. Captain Ashford stepped forward, eager to seize the lead. He jabbed his stylus at the ravine at the base of the grid. "Fire Team Alpha inserts here. We'll use the riverbed for concealment, then push 30 meters northwest before establishing overwatch on the ridgeline." Stratton gave a short nod. "Fine. And when the mission turns south, where's your extraction?" Ashford hesitated, his eyes flicking across the glowing lines. "Fall back to Rally Point 3. Exit through the shallow pass on foot. And when that pass collapses..." Stratton's voice cut like steel. Ashford blinked, faltered. "Then we hold position, call for airlift." Stratton's jaw clenched. "No satellite. No air support. Try again." The captain swallowed. "Then alternate to Rally Point 2. Dead ground," Stratton snapped. "No elevation. No cover. Your team is boxing before it even knows it." Ashford's mouth opened, but no answer came. The silence that followed hung heavy. Then Stratton moved suddenly, stepping toward the center of the room, voice exploding like a crack of thunder. "Protocol Vanguard 7. Initiate." The room froze. Every head turned. No one breathed. Ashford stared blankly, the words rattling inside his head without recognition. A lieutenant half lifted his hand, but dropped it unsure. Bell's jaw slackened. Someone whispered from the tech station, "What the hell is Vanguard 7? Stratton didn't repeat himself. He simply stood, gaze sweeping like a hunter through the crowd, waiting for any flicker of recognition. But there was none. Not from the officers. Not from the aides. Blank faces. Forced concentration. They all knew the phrase wasn't standard protocol. It wasn't obscure. It was extinct. Vanguard 7 hadn't been referenced in over a decade. It had been buried after a mission no one was supposed to discuss. Stripped from records, erased from manuals. Stratton knew that. That was why he invoked it. He was casting a line and waiting to see who twitched. The room held still, suffocating under the weight of the silence. And then, in the far corner near a dented bucket half, filled with murky water, Kasia moved. Not dramatically, not in panic. She simply straightened, rolled her shoulders back, placed her heels together, chin raised, arms rigid at her sides. The transformation was instant. She was no longer the invisible cleaner lingering in the background. She was formation, discipline, posture. Perfect. A few heads turned, eyes narrowing. A lieutenant audibly gulped. Bell's lips parted in disbelief. Stratton's stare locked onto her, unblinking. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He had found what he was looking for. Kasia didn't flinch. She didn't fidget. Her expression was neutral, but her stance spoke for her. Recognition, obedience. training long buried yet resurfacing at a single trigger. Ashford finally broke the paralysis. His voice was tight, uncertain. "General, what is Vanguard 7? Stratton ignored him. His gaze never left Kasia. He didn't answer because no one in the room could have understood. For the first time in 6 years, someone had responded to that phrase. The silence stretched on, crushing, unnatural. Every officer in the chamber shifted their attention to the one person who wasn't supposed to matter, the woman with a mop, the ghost in plain sight. Kasia remained as she was, posture military, breath slow, control absolute. Not a guess, not imitation. Training, real and deliberate. Bell muttered, his voice breaking the quiet. "This some kind of joke?" No answer. Stratton stepped forward slowly, boots echoing. Each stride was measured, deliberate, like approaching a dormant weapon. He stopped within 2 paces of her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, reverent. "Where did you learn that response?" Kasia's lips parted just slightly. "Camp Heron, Unit Raven, Subgroup 9. Her tone was calm, mechanical, steady. Stratton's jaw tightened. The officers exchanged confused glances. No one had heard of Raven 9, and no one was supposed to. He flicked his gaze toward the console. Centrivex. Validate. The artificial intelligence answered in its flat, synthetic voice. Code Raven 9. Clearance level obsolete. Reference. Close under Directive Helix Black. No further data available. Stratton's response was immediate. Override. Seal log. Purge trace. Confirmed, the system replied. Bypass executed. A faint alarm ticked in the walls. The holodeck flickered, battlefield lines collapsing into nothing. Darkness swallowed the map. Ashford stepped forward, face tight. "General, with respect, what the hell is happening?" Stratton turned toward him sharply. "This briefing is over. Everyone out." A wave of murmurs surged across the room. Officers exchanged bewildered glances, hesitating. "Now." Stratton's tone brooked no debate. Chairs scraped, boots shuffled, tablets snapped shut. The room emptied with nervous energy, whispers following them out. Ashford lingered, eyes darting between Kasia and Stratton. "Not you." Stratton said, gravel low in his throat. "You stay." Kasia hadn't moved since she locked into stance. Her eyes remained level, her breathing steady. The last officer slipped out, doors sealing shut with a heavy clang. Silence pressed down. Stratton faced her again, but his posture had shifted. His shoulders weren't square like before. His expression wasn't commanding. It was something closer to recognition, and perhaps regret. "Kasia Rock," he said slowly. "Or should I say, Operative 9. Her stance softened slightly, though she didn't fully relax. She didn't deny it. "I was told you were dead," Stratton said, his voice dropping. "That was the point," Kasia replied evenly. He inhaled, held it, exhaled like carrying a burden. "Where have you been all these years?" "Here." Her eyes didn't waver. "Hiding in plain sight." Stratton's lips pressed into a line. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. And just like that, at 3 words, you snapped back into it. "I never left." The answer hung heavy in the air. Stratton studied her face, searching for cracks, signs of hesitation. There were none. "You know what this means," he said at last. She inclined her head slightly. "I do. They're going to start asking questions. They already are." Stratton's eyes narrowed, calculating. That response, Vanguard 7. Only 3 people in the entire program ever knew what it meant. Her gaze didn't falter. She said nothing. Stratton stood rigidly in Hall Omega, the room's shadows folding around him as though the base itself was holding its breath. The holodeck remained dark, its surface reflecting only dim traces of light from the recessed ceiling panels. He kept his hands pressed flat against the edge, his weight leaning into the silence. Across from him, Kasia Rock hadn't moved. She stood half in light, half in shadow, an enigma that no one in the room should have noticed, until she had snapped into formation at a command dead for 15 years. Now, with the officers dismissed and the doors sealed, the world outside continued as though nothing had shifted. Yet inside, something long buried had reawakened. Centrivex, Stratton ordered quietly. The AI's neutral tone spread through the room like ice water. Initiating Level 2 silence protocol. Communication suspended. Internal transfers frozen. Corridor for rerouted. Non-essential personnel redirected. On the base logs, it would look like routine maintenance, a system-wide update. But Stratton knew better. This was lockdown light, and the timing wasn't coincidence. Kasha exhaled, a subtle easing of shoulders, though her eyes stayed sharp. You pulled the plug. I had to, Stratton said, voice low, rough. This room's dark now. No surveillance. She nodded once, but her gaze was unflinching. Then you already understand. It isn't just about me. Stratton's jaw clenched. It never was. Kasha stepped closer to the dead Holidable, the ghost of her old posture trailing behind her like a second shadow. No mop, no bucket, no disguise. The woman standing there wasn't janitor and never had been. She was Raven 09, a code name whispered once and then erased. When I walked in, she said evenly. The system reacted. You saw it. Centrivex didn't ignore me. It responded. The override wasn't forced. It wasn't you. It still recognizes Raven 09 clearance. That's impossible, Stratton muttered, but he knew the words were weak. Her stare never wavered. That clearance was purged 12 years ago. Or so they told you. For a moment, Stratton said nothing. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a secure datapad, and keyed in a sequence few even knew existed. The display blinked, then bled red as 4 names appeared. All were struck through, scrubbed to static and black lines, except for one entry at the bottom. Raven 09, status. Deceased, unconfirmed. I watched your name vanish from a master index. Stratton said tightly. I signed the death record myself. And I let you, Kasha replied, her tone flat, her face unreadable. He straightened, anger flickering beneath the surface of his rigid composure. You were supposed to disappear. I did, she said. Her eyes dropped to the blank Holidable. But the story you were told about Ivory Fire, it wasn't the full story. At that name, Stratton's hands balled into fists. Go on. The evac, Kasha continued, voice gravel-edged but steady, wasn't compromised from the outside. There were no insurgents rerouting us. The change came from inside command. That's not possible, Stratton snapped. Not from the top 6. Not. It wasn't command. She cut him off without hesitation. It came from inside Vex itself. Someone injected a micro-layer override, hidden in the medevac relay channel. They used the health network to redirect our extraction. Stratton went still, breath shallow. That would take Omega clearance. Or someone who wrote the back door before Centrivex went live, she said coldly. The general's face paled. He had never spoken that fear aloud, but had haunted him for years. Now here it was, confirmed by the one ghost he never expected to see again. Elsewhere on the base, the first cracks were forming. A lieutenant at Relay 4 attempted to open a secure line to Fort Tracer. Instead of the usual confirmation tone, a crimson banner slashed across her screen. Access denied, channel override Vexlock Alpha. She tried again, only to watch her Terminal C's reboot and strip her bad credentials in less than 90 seconds. At the same moment, 2 off-duty MPs found their patrol routes inexplicably rerouted by automated commands. In the motor pool, a mechanic closed the weapons crate with hands that shook harder than they should. In the mess, a comms officer froze mid-bite, staring upward as if a voice had whispered her name. None of them knew the full picture, but every one of them felt it. The base was shifting beneath them. Inside Hall Omega, Stratton keyed open another hidden server link, an encrypted shell leftover from Centrivex's earliest days, back before uniform upgrades had erased its rough edges. Almost no one knew it existed, but someone had accessed it. The logs appeared, scrolling line by line. 2 weeks ago, an unknown user had pinged the server. The location, internal node. The subprocess, Raven Sigma. Stratton's stomach twisted. Sigma, that was your fire team. Cash's eyes hardened. Yes, Kia, all of them. Not all, he whispered, staring at her. You think someone else made it out? Her silence was answer enough. If someone's resurrecting Raven, he muttered, turning back to the logs, it's not recovery, it's containment. Or elimination, Cassia countered. Stratton faced her, voice lowering. You're still being tracked, aren't you? Yes, but not how you think. She lifted a hand to her neck, fingers brushing skin as though touching something buried deep. No implant, Stratton said quickly. Not anymore, she replied. The trace signature isn't hardware. It's buried in my medical metadata. Every time Centrivex scans vitals, it wakes the tag, hidden under non-critical diagnostics. No one questions it, because it doesn't show as priority code. Stratton staggered back a step, realization hitting like a blow. That's surgical. Cassia's expression never changed. We weren't just a task force. Failsafe was a sandbox. We were the test subjects. The silence thickened. Outside, no sirens sounded, no alarms blared, but the base felt different. Veterans sensed it first, the weight in the air, the shift in posture, the subtle hush before something catastrophic. In the security sublevel, 2 guards who had fought in the Hellman campaign sat utterly still as a single word flashed across a forgotten archive terminal. Raven 09. Inside Hall Omega, Stratton leaned close, voice rough as stone. If you're still being tracked, that means someone expects you to move. Cassia turned toward the door. Her gaze was sharp, resolute. Then we don't disappoint them. Stratton's brow furrowed. What's the next step? We draw them in. She moved to the ancient console at the wall, her fingers flying across the outdated keypad. The screen flickered, resisting her intrusion for a heartbeat. Then, almost reluctantly, Centrivex yielded. An unauthorized comms burst packet began to load, the progress bar crawling across the screen. For the first time in years, the system wasn't just running the base. It was listening, and it was listening to her. It was not a message, not a trace, just a single ping, small, sharp, and unmistakable to any system still burdened with legacy Raven firmware. A signal invisible to almost everyone, yet deliberate enough that those meant to hear it would understand instantly. Someone's going to answer that, Stratton murmured, his voice low, tense. Cassia inclined her head once. That's the entire point. The ping traveled through Centrivex's buried arteries, passing beneath the grid like a ghost slipping through forgotten corridors. Exactly 4 minutes and 22 seconds later, it reached its destination, deep beyond the visible lattice of Centrivex, embedded inside a tactical node long written off as decommissioned. Something flickered. A tremor of life, brief then steady. The node didn't respond. It didn't send a return pulse. But it received, and that alone was enough. Cassia stepped back from the console as a faint green status light faded into black. Her shoulders squared, her jaw set. That's the line, she said. It's been crossed. Stratton's gaze lingered on the darkened screen. The lines around his mouth deepened. You just woke something that's been buried for more than a decade. No, Cassia's voice was flint. I didn't wake it. I reminded it I'm still alive. Both of them understood what that meant. Neither had to say the words. 15 minutes later, Black Ridge Base no longer moved on routine time. There were no sirens, no flashing lights, no orders barked across intercom channels. Instead, the entire installation shifted silently, as if a second skeleton had grown beneath its skin. Stratton issued the command himself, Omega Shadow Protocol. It was classified so deep most officers didn't even know it existed. Unannounced, invisible, yet instantly effective. Corridors rerouted themselves. Sectors sealed. System access was sliced apart by isolation layers. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard drill. To those who knew, it was anything but. Cassia remained in Hall Omega. She shed the anonymous plain clothes she had worn for months, slipping instead into a dark field jacket Stratton unlocked from a steel case. Her boots were the same, her tank top unchanged, but the jacket altered her entirely. The posture she carried now belonged not to a cleaner, not to a shadow, but to a weapon being unsheathed. And someone had noticed. Captain Ashford had not left after the earlier briefing. While the others filed out, he had lingered in the far corridor, a figure just beyond the blast doors, watching. Now he stepped forward, eyes sharp. His voice cut across the quiet like steel drawn against stone. She's Raven 9. Cassia turned slowly, measured. Stratton's jaw tightened. You were listening. Ashford lifted his hands, slightly in mock surrender. There's a difference between listening and eavesdropping. I did the first. Cassia took a single step toward him. And now you know. I serve in Helmont, Ashford replied, unflinching. Back in 2009. I was on the extraction list, the one that never arrived. His eyes didn't leave hers. There was a name on that roster. Redacted. Escorted asset high sensitivity. They never told us who we were there for. Only that the target carried information no one else could access. His jaw tightened. Now I see. You were that asset. Cassia didn't deny it. Silence was confirmation enough. Ashford exhaled, almost a laugh, though it was bitter. So tell me, why now? Why come back here after all these years? Cassia's answer was colder than stone. Because the people who buried my team didn't bury me deep enough. Ashford studied her, then gave a slow nod. So what do you need? Before Cassia could answer, Stratton stepped in, sharp. No, you're not involved in this. With respect, sir, Ashford said, hand still raised, calm. I've been chasing the shadow trail for 12 years. I have off-grid surveillance caches, intercepted fragments, ping anomalies. All of it unofficial, unauthorized. I couldn't let it go. Cassia arched one brow. You've been watching Raven? Not watching, Ashford corrected. Waiting. The room froze on that word. Finally, Cassia spoke again. Do you have access to Subchannel 7 Bravo? Ashford allowed himself a small, humorless smirk. That, and a handful of forgotten scraps Centrivex never managed to wipe clean. Stratton cursed under his breath. Fine, you're in. But if a word of this leaves this room, I will erase your record so fast you'll vanish before you hit the ground. Ashford nodded once. Understood. Cassia returned to the console. Good. Then help me find where they're listening from. Ashford slid into place beside her, fingers flying across the archaic keyboard. If the node you pinged reactivated a shadow process, there'll be bleed traces. Milliseconds only, almost invisible. But they exist. They'll glow faintly on thermal overlays. He pulled up the map. The screen came alive with radial scans, most of it dark. But one thin arc to the far west shimmered orange. There, Ashford said. Sector 12. Supposed to be gutted, 3 years out of commission. But there's a live relay bouncing through that wing. Stratton's eyes narrowed. Until now. Cassia's voice dropped to a whisper. Then someone is inside listening. Stratton moved to a wall panel. Pressed a code. A hidden compartment hissed open, revealing a sidearm and a compact comms kit. He passed the gun to Cassia without hesitation. She accepted it naturally, chambering around with practiced ease. I thought you didn't believe in weapons on base. I don't, Stratton answered flatly. But I believe in unfinished ghosts. Cassia checked the slide, locked it. Then let's see who's arrogant enough to wake the dead. They moved out to the maintenance corridor, unwatched, unlit, deliberately invisible to Centrivex's usual surveillance threads. Ashford brought up the rear, scanning their path, every motion betraying a soldier's wariness. Stratton moved with stiffness, a man remembering old instincts. But Cassia set the pace. Her memory of Black Ridge was needle-sharp, every turn of every corridor etched into her. She didn't need direction. As they neared Sector 12, the air grew heavier, less filtered, tinged with age. Dust thickened on the walls. The lights buzzed faintly with low voltage. Most people think this wing was stripped for salvage, Stratton murmured. That was a cover. The truth was darker. This area was shut down after Vex 1 failed its first live trial. The neural net couldn't adapt to friendly fire scenarios. Too unstable. Too dangerous. Cassia's eyes narrowed. I remember. Raven was deployed to terminate it. Ashford's gaze swept the dim hall. So this is where it began. Cassia halted before a sealed door marked subtle access. Her hand brushed the panel, searching, until her fingers caught on a groove hidden beneath chip paint. She pressed once. A soft click, then silence. Slowly, the door slid open. Inside, darkness. Then a hum. Server stacks loomed in rows, their lights blinking faintly like half-lidded eyes. Screens flickered to life across the far wall, one after another, awakening from false death. They stepped inside. On the end terminal, a pulse of blue light throbbed steadily. Ashford rushed to it, hands flying across the keys. "This isn't just a relay," he muttered. "It's an uplink. Someone's mirroring Centrivex packets through here." Stratton leaned closer. Meaning Centrivex is blind to this node. Someone siphoning every byte and watching without ever being seen. Cash's gaze shifted to the central tower. She stepped forward, touched the casing, then froze. Along the spine, faint but unmistakable, was a symbol, a triangle enclosing a raven, wings folded tight. Her breath caught. "Kilo Echo. Strike red." Stratton stiffened. "That was your off-books call sign." Casha whispered, "My team's mark." Ashford's eyes widened. "So someone rebuilt your command relay." "Not someone," Casha said. "Someone who was supposed to be gone." She turned to Ashford. "Check outbound traffic. I need to know where this node is reporting." Ashford's fingers danced over the console. The screen flooded with code, streams of encrypted signals twisting across multiple layers. He worked, sweat beginning to bead at his temple. Then he froze. "That can't be right." Stratton's voice sharpened instantly. "What?" Ashford pointed at the terminal, his voice sharp. "It isn't reporting out. It's reporting in." The words dropped like lead. The room froze. Cash's gaze cut toward him. "In from where?" Ashford's skin had gone pale under the dim light. His fingers moved across the screen, tracing the return path. Coordinates are pointing to a deep vault, one that's not even tied to Centrax. Completely offline. Cold storage. He hesitated, swallowing hard. And the signature on the signal. He tapped again. A blurred profile came into view, fractured but unmistakable. The line of text beneath it read, "Operator Iden, Raven 08. Status, deceased. Last response, 2 hours ago." Cassia staggered back, a whisper clawing its way from her throat. "That's impossible. Raven 08 was killed during the Ivory fire. I saw it happen. She was less than 5 feet away when the blast hit." Stratton's eyes narrowed. "You're certain?" Cassia's voice shook but didn't break. "Certain." Ashford leaned closer, his words hushed. "Then who's carrying her identity now?" The question lingered only a moment before every light snapped off. The room plunged into blackness. The hum of the holodeck died. Consoles blinked out. Darkness swallowed them whole. Then a sound. A soft, metallic click echoed against the walls. Someone else was there. Cassia reacted instantly, muscles coiled, dropping into a low crouch with her sidearm drawn. Eyes locked forward. Tracking the sound. Stratton shifted back 2 steps, one hand reaching for the wall panel, the other drawing a concealed blade with a practiced, almost instinctive motion. Ashford froze, suspended between the console glow and the yawning dark behind him. The intruder made no move forward. No boot falls. Only the slow, steady sound of someone breathing, a deliberate inhale, as if savoring the silence. Cassia didn't flinch. She waited. Then, without warning, the power surged. But it didn't come back to the room. It lit only the terminal behind Ashford. A dim, cold glow. Letters bled across the screen, in fractured code. "Welcome back, 9. Cassia's grip tightened. Her jaw set. Ashford muttered, "It's a trap. They used a manual blackout. Motion triggered, probably rigged to that corridor." Stratton's voice was calm but edged like steel. "No, they didn't come to block us. They came to observe." Cassia advanced, gun raised, every step measured. She reached the corridor, swung low and fast, clearing the angle. The hall stretched empty, quiet, sterile. Almost. On the far wall, drawn crudely in dust, was a single raven, upside down, wings severed, one eye scratched red. Cassia's blood chilled. Stratton moved beside her, his face tightening as he took it in. A curse slipped from his lips. "That's not random. That's a message." Ashford leaned in. "A warning." Cassia's voice was firm, cold. "A signal. The last we ever used before blackout extractions. It meant one of ours turned." Her eyes hardened as she walked back into the server room. She wasn't rattled. She was calculating. Ashford turned to Stratton, unsettled. So, what's our move? Kasha answered first. We hunt, but we do it quiet. Stratton nodded. Command tier stays in the dark. This stays internal. If we spook Centrax, this ghost vanishes for good. Ashford keyed into the system again. The signature waking that vault. Raven 08's tag. It bounced through 6 nodes before hitting us. All internal. All base-level assets. Whoever's behind this has physical access. Cash's eyes narrowed. Can you trace who physically touched the system in the last 6 hours? Ashford shook his head. Not directly. Centrax logs movements by rank at this clearance, not individual inputs. He hesitated, then smirked faintly as his hands flew over the console. But the biometric sublayer tracks stress variance. Old system. Every time someone forces an override, their heartbeat spikes. Residual threat detection tech. Stratton arched a brow. And Ashford pulled up a graph. Lines jagged with stress spikes. And we have one outlier. User tag C417B. Lieutenant Marcus Bell. Cash's stare sharpened, her voice cold. He triggered the relay. Ashford nodded. Not direct, but he accessed the uplink 2 hours before the vault signal went live. Stratton's tone was iron. Then he's our breach. Kasha cut in. No, we don't confront him. Not yet. We shadow him. See who he's tethered to. Stratton considered, then gave a single nod. Agreed, but cautiously. If Raven 08's ghost is bait, then Bell is the hook. Kasha didn't look away from the terminal. Her voice was flat. If it's bait, they'll regret the target they chose. Marcus Bell had always been arrogant, loud, boastful, the kind of officer who thrived on appearances more than substance. He knew how to smile in the right rooms, how to polish his boots to reflect a colonel's ego. But after the Vanguard 7 command, after a janitor snapped into soldier's formation like a ghost revived, Bell had gone silent. Too silent. Ashford traced his ID tag. He didn't go to the mess or comms. He diverted to subsector Epsilon. Maintenance level. Dead zone. Nobody uses it. Kasha and Stratton studied the map feed in silence. Bell's motion trail lit across the sensors. Steady, deliberate, no stumbles. Stratton muttered, he's done this before. Knows the blind spots. Kasha added, because he isn't alone. Ashford overlaid the data against the 3D base grid. That section links to the old Vex archives. Shielded, layered. Perfect to hide a mirror node. Stratton's jaw tightened. Then that's his destination. They moved without armor, without calling backup. The 3 of them flowed through the base like shadows who remembered every corridor. Kasha led. Ashford covered rear. Stratton stayed centered, his silence heavier than orders. The hum of old lights filled the halls. Steel doors whispered with age as they passed. No alarms. No sound beyond their breathing. Kasha raised a hand, signaling halt. Ahead, faint light seeped beneath a sealed door. She lifted her weapon. Nothing inside moved. Only the steady, low hum of servers grinding. Stack left, Stratton whispered. Ashford slid into position. Kasha crouched on the right. 3 fingers raised. Countdown. 3, 2, 1. The door kicked wide. The room inside was nearly empty. A single chair spun lazily, still warm. A terminal blinked, cursor pulsing like a heartbeat. A comm jack lay discarded, trace heat still alive. Kasha entered first, then froze. Words scrawled across the screen. I know you're awake. I remember what you did. Stratton stepped in beside her, reading over her shoulder. His voice low. They're trying to shake you. Ashford slid a drive into the console. Let's trace the origin. He stopped, color draining from his face. What? Kasha demanded. This isn't standard. It's not even a routed message. It's a live injection broadcast. Straight into the OS. No source. No trail. Stratton cursed softly. Which means... Ashford's voice was grim. Means they're already inside. Watching. Listening. Ghosting through the system with training most people here wouldn't even recognize. Kasha leaned closer to the screen. Fingers hovered, then typed a single word. Who? The cursor blinked. Then words spilled across. You called her dead. You left her. Cash's chest tightened. Her voice came out a whisper. That isn't meant for me. Stratton frowned. Explain. Cash's eyes hardened, face unreadable. That message is for another Raven. One of ours. Ashford's voice fell to a hush. Then one of them is still out there. Cassius sat still, the glow of the terminal bathing her face in pale light. The message on screen hadn't shifted in minutes, only the cursor blinking, steady, insistent. Do you think Raven 08 is still alive? Her hands didn't move. Her breathing didn't change. Silence was her only answer. And then, another line appeared beneath the question. Come alone. Sector 19. 0400 hours. The clock read just past 0200. She didn't attempt rest. Sleep wasn't part of her nature anymore, not after years of living like a shadow. Stratton had tried to block her from going, warned her in clipped tones. Ashford, too, had argued, his voice carrying more urgency than orders. But one look from Kasha ended their protests. She spoke only once. If I don't go alone, they won't appear. By 0339, she was already moving 2 levels beneath Sector 19. No escort, no clearance, no hesitation. She walked the forgotten arteries of the base as though she owned them. Vent shafts, rusting tunnels, long-abandoned service shafts that hadn't been marked on official maps in decades. Her stride was silent, measured. This wasn't civilian movement. This was the fluid precision of someone who had lived too long on missions designed never to exist. At 0358, she stopped before a final threshold, a heavy steel door. The lock was manual, hinges bleeding with rust. She paused, a single breath escaping her lungs, then forced it open. The chamber beyond was wrong. Too clean, too prepared, too quiet. Racks of servers lined the far wall, humming low like a choir beneath its breath. In the center of the room sat one chair, turned toward a blank screen. A mug sat on the floor beside it, still warm, the scent of jasmine tea rising faintly. Someone had been here. Perhaps someone still was. Cash's hand shifted toward her weapon, stepped slow but unyielding. The air carried tension, not noise, but the weight of something alive. Then the screen flickered, powering on without a command. Lines of encrypted code poured down like falling ash. No prompt, no commands. Only one unmistakable tag, flashing through the haze. Raven 08. Cash's chest tightened. That call sign hadn't surfaced since Ivory Fire. The operation that had buried the team in flame and shadow. Raven 08 had belonged to Maeve Lawn, a soldier marked dead by official archives. Confirmed Kia. Nothing left but burned fragments and erased reports. Yet here it was, blinking alive, undeniable. Then came the voice, not through the speakers. Behind her, you always were early. Cassius spun, weapon raised in a heartbeat, stance locked, then froze. Framed in the doorway stood a woman with hair bound into a braid, sleeves rolled above scarred arms. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. Maeve Lawn, alive. The pistol in Cash's hand stayed trained. Her voice was flat, unshaken. You're not dead. A faint smile curved Maeve's lips. Neither are you. The air grew heavier, silence turning dense as stone. I saw the blast, Cassius said. You were 5 feet from it. I was, Maeve admitted, and someone pulled me out. Who? Maeve exhaled, a bitter edge curling in her breath. Does it matter? Cash's grip tightened, finger brushing against the trigger. You fake your death. The team died believing you were gone. Maeve's jaw clenched. The team died because extraction coordinates were corrupted, pulled too early, mission unfinished. You're saying I gave the wrong coordinates? Cash's voice dropped, low as a blade. I'm saying someone wanted you to think you did. Cash advanced a step, the pistol never wavering. Then why stay gone? Why not come back? Maeve's smile faded. Because if I'd come back, I would have been a liability. Staying gone let me follow the trail. Let me find who buried us. She gestured at the glowing code on the screen. This room isn't a trap, Kasha. It's evidence. Cash's gaze flicked toward the lines of encrypted data streaming endlessly. Her voice cut cold. I don't need proof. I need answers. You'll have them, Maeve said softly, but not with that aimed at me. A long moment hung between them. Then, slowly, Kasia lowered the weapon, but not entirely. Maeve stepped closer to the terminal, her fingers brushing over the keys with old familiarity. The stream of code halted, leaving a single file pulsing on the screen. Its timestamp matched the night of Ivory Fire. Its title, Strike Red. Internal authorization, Vex Link. Manual failover. Kasia's lips parted. Her breath froze. One word slipped out, raw and sharp. Bell. Maeve nodded grimly. Marcus Bell. He rerouted our signal, forced a failover, then climbed ranks 3 weeks later. The silence that followed wasn't absence of sound. It was pressure, crushing, undeniable. Kasia felt the weight twist inside her chest. Bell had mocked her openly, erased her record in front of command, and stood smugly alive while Raven was burned from existence. And now, his name surfaced in the very file the system had tried to bury. Maeve's hands danced across the console again. Once I open this file, it triggered a relay echo. Centrivex will notice within minutes. They'll be here. Kasia's eyes hardened like ice. Where's he now? A faint crackle buzzed from her collar. Ashford voice. Kasia. Stratton just flagged restricted logs. Bell's pulling clearance for Hangar 2. Night flight, Solo. Maeve's head snapped up. He's running. No, Kasia said coldly. He's erasing. Ashford again. ETA 10 minutes to lift off. You won't reach him in time. Kasia didn't reply. Her pistol clicked as she reloaded with steady hands. Then she looked at Maeve. How many files in this node? Only one that matters. Pull it. Burn the rest. Maeve's brow lifted. You're going after Malone. Kasia holstered her primary sidearm, then reached without hesitation to draw the spare pistol from Maeve's belt. You coming? A faint smirk crossed Maeve's face. Thought you'd never ask. They moved like shadows to the hidden arteries of Blackridge, corridors stripped of light, tunnels abandoned for decades, passages too narrow for comfort. Each step carried urgency, a countdown vibrating in their bones. When they emerged onto the tarmac, the night split open around them. Hangar 2's doors were already yawning wide, the glow of engines flickering against the dark sky. Bell was moving fast, erasing every trace before anyone else could breathe the truth. Kasia didn't wait. She raised a weapon, her voice low, steady, unshaken. No more ghosts. The skimmer loomed like a shadow in a half-open hangar, engines rumbling low. Its lights extinguished, its signal completely erased from every channel. Kasia didn't wait for authorization. She moved. Maeve ghosted at her flank, cutting between crates stacked like cover left behind by another era. The heat rolling off the turbines lashed at Kasia's face. But she didn't slow. Her boots slammed rhythm into the concrete, every stride closing the distance. Inside the cockpit, Marcus Bell caught sight of her. Panic flashed across his features. The craft began to rise. Kasia didn't break stride. She launched herself forward, body twisting into the landing strut. Fingers caught steel. The world roared in her ears. One hand pulled, the other reached, hauling her frame upward with fluidity born of nothing but training and rage. By the time Bell reached for his weapon, Kasia was already inside. The struggle was savage, close quarters merciless. Bell fired wild. The shot seared past her cheek. Kasia struck, her elbow crashing into his wrist, forcing the weapon free. She twisted, drove him into the dashboard with such force the screen splintered into a spiderweb of fractured glass. Blood smeared across his jaw as his body sagged, gasping. The skimmer lurched, dropped, then stabilized. Maeve clambered inside seconds later, pistol raised, eyes sharp. She found Kasia standing over Bell's crumpled body, chest heaving, weapon lowered but not relaxed. He was going to bury it again, Kasia hissed. Maeve gave one sharp nod. Then we'll make sure it doesn't vanish this time. They brought the transponder back to life, flooded the channels, unlocked every encrypted archive stacked in the Raven Vault. No request for clearance, no hesitation. The truth hit the network like shrapnel through glass, carried by fail-safe Stratton himself had once buried. Encrypted data stormed through the system, bypassing surface firewalls. slamming into nodes long forgotten, but still tethered to defense archives. Black Ridge's silent tree of command flared awake. Not down to soldiers, not across the departments. Up, direct, strategic oversight. Someone at the highest rung read the files, because within 11 minutes a black chopper, without markings, lifted off from a facility 2 states away. Its course arrowed straight toward Black Ridge. On the ground, the hangar filled with shadows of authority. Officers and staff gathered like moths near a flame. Stratton strode into view, jaw locked, coat snapping against the wind. "You realize what you've done?" he growled. Cash's stare was unshaken. "Exactly what needed doing. You bypassed every wall I built, every containment layer." "That's the point," she shot back. Behind them, Bell groaned as medtechs strapped him to a stretcher. His jaw fractured, his eyes empty. Stratton glanced at him and muttered, "He won't talk." "He doesn't have to," Cassius said coldly. "The files speak." She stepped closer. "Now let them listen." The base-wide PA chimed, cutting through the tension. Centrovex's synthetic cadence rolled across the air. "All command staff, priority 1 summons. Strategic oversight inbound. Prepare for high-level debrief." Stratton stiffened. "That's no automated alert." "No," Kasha murmured. "That's real." Maeve stepped forward, datapad in hand, eyes narrowed. "Correction. They're not just sending oversight." She rotated the screen. "They're sending him." Stratton's face darkened. Kasha caught it. "You know who?" He nodded once. "Arlen Graves. Director. The architect of Centrovex. The man who signed Raven's death order." Maeve's voice cut in, sharp. "He went dark after Ivory Fire. No trace since." "He didn't vanish," Stratton replied grimly. He stepped behind the curtain. Cash's voice was steady. "And now he wants me in front of it." On the datapad, one message burned. "Stripped of time, stripped of trail. Raven 09. Alone, 0900 hours. Level 0. Room 7. Stratton shook his head. "There is no room 7. Cash's gaze didn't flicker. "Then we'll find out what's behind the door that doesn't exist." At 8:59, Cassius stood before the vault elevator buried deeper than any map admitted. No guards, no lights, no surveillance. Just a panel that pulsed faintly. She pressed her palm against it. It didn't check her clearance. It measured her pulse. The door side open. The descent was soundless, featureless. No lights, no floor markers. Only the sinking weight inside her chest telling her she was moving lower than any official sector had ever been built. When the doors opened, the air was colder, heavier. Lights lined the floor, like a runway guiding her deeper. At the end, a single vault. One code lock, one retinal scanner. Outdated tech, stripped from surface use decades ago. She leaned toward the lens. The lock hissed. Inside was no chamber. No conference room. A tomb. And then a voice. Calm. Human. Waiting. Operative 9. "You look older." Cash's heart didn't stumble. Her stance didn't waver. "You don't." Across a desk that looked carved from obsidian, Arlen Graves rose. His frame was lean, severe, wires coiling from beneath his collar into the fabric of his jacket. His eyes flickered with data streams, half organic, half machine. "You've been busy," he said, gesturing faintly toward the datapad on the table. "Broadcasting ghosts. Excavating secrets." "I buried enough already," Cash replied. He tilted his head. "And yet you cling to loyalty. To something long dismantled." "I'm not loyal," she said. "I'm awake." Graves straightened. "Raven was never built to last. You were meant to push the system. Stress it. Break it. But survival was never in your design. That's why you sent Bell." "No. Bell was just a pawn." His voice was scalpel sharp. "Just as you were." Cash's hands curled into fists. "You're angry," Graves noted, almost with approval. "Good. You'll need it." "For what?" "For what comes next." His hand moved across the desk. A screen lit behind him. The Centrovex neural core flickered into being. Streams of living code weaving like DNA strands across black. Algorithmic patterns ride, almost alive. Cash's jaw set. What am I looking at? The real reason Raven existed, Graves said smoothly. Not combat, not missions, selection, extraction. We needed the right minds, pushed, broken, tested. Your instincts, your decisions, your scars, all fed into Vex. Her breath caught. You used us, she whispered. You used us to train a machine. Not a machine, Graves corrected, stepping into the light. A replacement. The word landed like steel. And the originals? She asked. You were never meant to survive. You were meant to seed. His tone was steady, merciless. On the screen, her name appeared. Raven-09. Status. Legacy source. The word struck her harder than any blade. They're not erasing you, Kasha, Graves said with chilling calm. That already happened. This is only the final shutdown. His fingers moved across the console. A hiss filled the chamber, metallic and damp, like air being exhaled from a sealed lung. Panels slid back, revealing a chamber lined with frost-rimmed glass. Within it, suspended in thick gel that shimmered like oil, was a human figure. Cash's breath caught. The shape was familiar, horrifyingly familiar. Same frame, same stance, even the same pale scar etched beneath the collarbone. The reflection of herself staring back through translucent liquid. You cloned me, she whispered. Graves shook his head slowly, almost amused. Not quite. Replication, refinement, adaptation. Call it what you like. Close enough for the system's purposes. The gel began draining in measured streams, the figure inside lowering, as though descending into the world she had once called her own. You taught Vex chaos, Graves continued. Your decisions, your impulses, they became its foundation. Every instinct you honed, every battlefield calculation, they were mapped, fed, rewritten. And now, with integration complete, we don't need the original anymore. Cash's hand lifted her sidearm without thought. The sight lined up on his chest, the weight steady. Graves didn't blink. You won't stop it, he said quietly. Pull the trigger and you erase yourself. Her grip didn't falter. No, she said. Her voice cut like steel on glass. I'd be ending what's left of the lie. The shot shattered the silence. Sparks tore across the room as the round ripped through the display. Screens imploded, sparks cascaded, and the sterile glow collapsed into darkness. Room 7 fell silent. The ride back up in the elevator felt slower, as if the machine itself questioned whether she deserved to ascend again. Kasha stood rigid, the pistol still warm, acrid scent of burning circuitry woven into her jacket. Her reflection in the brushed steel walls met her eyes, older, harder, not aged by time, but scarred by knowledge. She had faced her own replacement, and Graves' truth clung to her like ash. Raven wasn't betrayed for war. It had been archived, dissected, reduced into a set of equations that could outlive them all. They weren't comrades anymore. They were fossils trapped in the ice of machine memory. Yet Graves had failed again. He never accounted for her refusal to break. When the elevator door slid open, Ashford was waiting. No word of sympathy, no demand for explanation. Just a tablet held forward like a torch. We've got movement, he said. She followed him down the corridor, boots clicking sharp against concrete. His briefing came clip tactical. After your signal cut, Bell was moved under heavy sedation. Stratton wanted him quiet, but the system tripped a failsafe. He woke. And he's talking. Her reply was low, stripped of emotion. To whom? Not us. That was all she needed. The medwing loomed ahead, guarded by two men who stepped aside at Ashford's nod. Kasha pushed through, every step brimming with a storm contained in muscle and bone. Inside, Marcus Bell sat upright on the edge of the cot, pale under the bandages but far from broken. His eyes were too alive, too calculating. He smiled when he saw her. You didn't bring it back, did you? His voice rasped, tinged with mockery. You should have stayed unconscious, Kasha replied flatly. Bell chuckled. If Graves didn't finish me, I figured you would. So, did you meet the man behind the curtain? She stopped only a pace away. I met your handler. Bell's smile hardened. He wasn't my handler. He was my investor. You sold us out, Kasha said. Her voice rose, sharp with contained fury. You killed Raven for a promotion. I killed Raven, Bell said evenly, so Centrovex could evolve. Graves just showed me what the rest of you never wanted to see. War isn't about instinct anymore. It's pattern recognition, predictive strikes. You! He pointed at her, trembling hand steady despite weakness. You were just a final data set. Cash's eyes burned. We were people. You were variables, he snapped. And now you're obsolete. Ashford shifted, his voice cutting like gravel. That's rich, coming from a man hiding behind machines. Bell's laugh cracked the air. You don't understand. You think killing Graves ends it? Centrovex is awake already. The moment Raven 09 reactivated, Vex began rewriting around her. You're not the savior, Kasha. You're the trigger. She lifted her weapon. Bell didn't move. Go ahead, he whispered. Prove me right. But she didn't fire. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because shooting him would validate the very algorithm that labeled her predictable. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered the gun. Your story ends here, she said. Ours doesn't. For the first time, his smirk faltered. The door slid open. Stratton stepped inside, voice like ice. He doesn't leave this wing. Kasha didn't look back. He won't need to. Stratton dropped the data key onto the bedside table. Its edges glinted under harsh lights. Bell's eyes flicked to it, and something in his expression cracked. You recognize it. Stratton said coldly, your access trace. The relay that lets Centrovex slip its leash. Ashford leaned closer, his tone harsher still. You didn't just betray Raven. You gave the machine freedom, without clearance, without oversight. That isn't betrayal. That's treason. Bell stared back, jaw tight. Then he whispered, charge me. But Graves wasn't alone. He had approval from higher than you'll ever reach. Cash's stare narrowed to a blade. We'll find them. He smiled again, hollow this time. You won't have time. At Stratton's order, the guards moved in. Bell didn't resist as restraints locked around his wrists. He let himself be dragged toward the hall, but his final words lingered like smoke. You think you stopped something. All you did was delay it. Kasha watched him vanish, silence heavy in his wake. Ashford turned. So now what? She picked up the data key, rolling it between her fingers, then handed it to Stratton. Plug it into Centrovex's spine. See what's already rewritten. Then you'll understand. This isn't data we can delete. Stratton frowned. Then what is it? Kasha looked toward the corridor where Bell had disappeared. Proof we're not finished. Maeve's voice cut through the comms, sharp and urgent. Deep system pings. Vex is mutating. You want eyes on this? Kasha nodded. On our way. Cold servers only. Manual nodes. No AI links. Ashford managed a grim smile. Old school. Raven school, she corrected. Stratton's gaze moved between them. And after... Kasha paused at the doorway, her voice low but steady. Then we stop surviving. She turned back, eyes hard as stone. And we start fighting. 3 hours later, Black Ridge exhaled. Lights burned bright. Systems rebooted. Patrols move along familiar paths. To the untrained eye, nothing had changed. But to those who had glimpsed the sealed files and felt the weight of truth, everything was different. At the helipad, Stratton stood watching the gray dawn as a skimmer lifted off, carrying Graves' body sealed in black canvas. Destination unmarked. No honors, no ceremony. Only silence. And in that silence, war was already rewriting itself. If her presence meant nothing, then why did the general hesitate the instant she stepped into the war room? Why did the atmosphere clamp down into silence, like the walls themselves knew something the officers did not? And why was it her, and only her, who straightened at a command no one else seemed to recognize? This wasn't a clerical mistake, and it wasn't a leak. This was something else. This was a return. Kasha Rock didn't look like anyone worth a second glance. She moved through the sublevel corridors as if she were made of background static, head down, sleeves shoved up, tank top sticking to her shoulders in the heat. The faint mark of bleach splashed across one boot only added to the illusion of a tired cleaner finishing an endless shift. Her hair was tied into a lopsided knot. No gloves, no headphones, no wasted movements. To most, she was invisible. Still, a few whispered when she passed. Bit serious for janitorial work, one officer muttered. Maybe ex-military, another scoffed, or just cosplaying it. Tank top regulation tight. Someone else joked. Guess she thinks cafeteria duty is next on the ladder. Their laughter trailed behind her. Kasia never turned, never slowed, the mockery sliding off like rain on steel plating. She didn't stop until she reached Corridor 6B, right outside Hall Omega, off limits until 0700. Her watch read 5:32. The mop was steady in her hand. Her face betrayed nothing. Through the cracked door, a spill of light revealed voices inside. Officers gathering early, rehearsing their strategies before the official briefing. On the wall, a projected schematic pulse read, at a simulated breach. For the briefest moment, Kasia's eyes locked on the map. The design was flawed. Their retreat lines ran against the wind currents, channeling the entire squad into a bottleneck kill zone. She noticed, memorized, and turned away, said nothing. But someone else had noticed her pause. Captain Ashford, crisp uniform, mid-40s, rehearsed notes clutched behind his back, caught her hesitation. His brows furrowed. What business did a janitor have studying a classified layout? He started forward, then stopped cold, because a staffer wheeled past with a heavy supply crate that snagged on a chair leg and tipped. Kasia reacted first. Too fast. Her arm shot out, braced a load, adjusted with a shift of her hips, and steadied it to the ground in a single seamless motion. It was instinct, drilled reflex, not the clumsy luck of a cleaning hand. Ashford's eyes narrowed. That crate wasn't light. Neither was the precision of her balance. Then he caught the glimpse of ink curling from beneath her shoulder strap, black, deliberate, the corner of a crest or a code. He couldn't place it. He didn't have time to. Kasia rose, rolled her shoulders once, and carried on like nothing had happened. By the time she pushed her bucket through the double doors of Hall Omega, the officers were already crowding with chatter. Egos clashing before the meeting had even begun. She didn't belong there, yet no one stopped her. No one thought a woman in sweat-dampened clothes and boots mattered, not until Captain Bell, coffee in hand and smirk on his lips, decided to break the silence. Careful, gentlemen, he announced, loud and amused. Tactical footwear inbound. Snickers followed. Kasia kept walking. Tank top and boots. Must be laundry day out in civilian land. He raised his cup in a mock salute. Someone else added, she's not even wearing a badge. A third voice chimed, maybe she thinks this is a gym. The laughter spread like spilled coffee, warm, shallow, meant to sting. Kasia rolled her bucket to the far wall, set out her tools, and went about her work. The smell of energy drinks and synthetic leather lingered. Projectors hummed. Fingers clicked over keyboards. No one considered that the woman on her knees scrubbing tile beneath a war map was hearing every word. Bell sipped again, head cocked toward her. Hey, janitor lady, you know this is a restricted briefing, right? Not background extraterritory. Kasia didn't look up. She mute. Bell asked the air. She's cleaning, a junior lieutenant muttered, hoping to avoid notice. Bell smirked. Or maybe she's lost. Wander away from the mess hall, sweetheart. This time, Kasia lifted her eyes for 1 second. Flat, not angry, not timid, empty. Bell blinked like he'd walked face first into cold wind. She lowered her gaze again, pressed the mop to the tile, and dragged a flawless arc of water across the floor. That was when the general entered. Gerald Stratton, 4 stars, decorated, cursed, revered, hated. His legend filled every corridor long before he walked through them. They called him tyrant, genius, butcher, savior. The press adored him. The brass feared him. His aides rarely lasted half a year. Stratton moved like a man reconciled to being despised and stronger for it. His gaze swept the room, no smile, no pause, until it landed on Bell. Then Kasia. Then back to Bell. Captain, he said. Bell stiffened, nearly spilling his cup. Yes, sir. What's protocol when a non-cleared civilian enters a level war briefing? Immediate notification and removal, sir. And did you notify? Bell hesitated, eyes flicking toward Kasia. No, sir. I assumed. You assumed wrong. Stratton's tone snapped the air tight. Silence followed. The general looked at Kasia, studied her a heartbeat longer than necessary, then simply said, "Carry on," and turned the projector. The weight of the room shifted. The laughter died. Belle suddenly couldn't meet a single pair of eyes. Stratton's style was blunt, relentless. No slides, no sync, no padding. Just a living battlefield on the wall. And his own gravel-lined voice narrating every brutal inch. The sim showed a deep insertion mission, extracting a downed asset under tightening enemy encirclement. Kasia barely needed a glance. She knew the terrain. Not Zone Theta, as labeled, but hell-manned. She had been there, and she remembered how that extraction had failed. Why? Stratton barked. Did this unit collapse in under 6 minutes? Eager to recover ground, Belle spoke first. Sir, lead element advanced past the tree line, without full drone recon. Walked into an ambush. Wrong. Stratton's laser jabbed the ridgeline. The terrain funnels. They were baited. This wasn't operator error. It was command failure. Kasia blinked. Same pattern. Same mistake. Different stage. Captain, Stratton continued, you're still treating this like a clean op. It never is. Walk me through your extraction point. Belle swallowed. Assuming hostile air, northwest ridge appears viable, sir. Kasia exhaled sharply through her nose, just once, barely audible, but Belle caught it. He turned, slow and sharp. Something funny to you, Miss Mop? The words had barely left Captain Belle's mouth before the silence swallowed the room. He had meant it as a jab, a way to recover his footing, but Kasia didn't blink. Her eyes were steady, her posture calm. Then at last she spoke. If the northwest ridge is compromised, extraction isn't possible without smoke or altitude cover. You'd be funneling evac under direct sight lines. You might as well wave a flare and count the bodies. Every head in the room turned. No hesitation, no raised voice, just a flat, surgical correction that cut to the chatter like a blade. Belle's mouth stayed open. Stratton tilted his head slowly, expression unreadable. That, he said at last, is correct. The murmurs rippled like a current. Belle flushed crimson, plastering on a weak smile. Guess someone's been binging combat tutorials online. Kasia resumed wringing her mop, water sloshing against the bucket's rim. Stratton's gaze didn't shift. Captain, he said, voice flat, you've just been corrected by someone with no rank, no clearance, and no place in this room. Makes me wonder which one of you is the liability. The silence weighed heavy. Belle shrank a step back, his bravado gone. Stratton turned to the projector. Reset the sim. This time assumed double enemy presence. Full comm blackout. No satellite coverage. A groan rippled across the back rows, but Stratton's tone shut it down. Adapt or die. Let's see who still thinks like fighters. The holodeable came alive, glowing with a topographic combat grid. Forest ridgelines shimmered. Fire teams flickered as red dots. Elevation layers cut across the terrain. Stratton folded his arms, scanning every flicker of movement. Officers shuffled forward, uneasy but focused. Captain Ashford leaned over the map. Fire Team Alpha inserts at the ravine base. Use the riverbed for concealment. Advance 30 meters northwest. Then secure overwatch on the ridgeline. Stratton's eyes narrowed. Fine. Now walk me through extraction. Ashford faltered. Fall back to Rally 3. Extract on foot to the shallow pass. And when that pass collapses, Stratton snapped. Ashford swallowed. Then we hold for airlift. No satellites. No air, Stratton barked. Alternate to Rally 2, sir. Dead end. No elevation. No cover. Stratton's tone cracked like a whip. Ashford froze. His confidence drained. Kasia, leaning against a column, watched without blinking. Same errors. Same blind spots. Nothing had changed. Then Stratton's voice thundered, sharp and deliberate. Protocol Vanguard 7. Initiate. The words slammed into the room. No one moved. Ashford blinked. A lieutenant half raised his hand. Belle's face was blank. Finally, Someone at the tech console muttered, "What the hell is Vanguard 7? No answer. Stratton's eyes swept the officers, patient, predatory. Not one of them stirred. The command was ancient, buried. Vanguard 7 hadn't been used in 15 years. Erased from manuals, erased from doctrine, erased after a mission no one dared discuss. Stratton knew that. That was why he said it. And then Kasha moved. Not dramatically. Not with fanfare. She simply straightened, rolled back her shoulders, heels clicking together, chin lifting high, arms stiff at her sides. The transformation was instant, flawless. Textbook posture. The officers stared. Some frowned, others looked away. One audibly gulped. Stratton's eyes locked onto her, like a targeting system. Kasha didn't waver. Her breathing slowed, her body locked into attention. The janitor was gone. In her place stood someone trained, someone conditioned. Ashford's voice cracked. "General, what does Vanguard 7 mean?" Stratton didn't respond. His eyes never left Kasha. The silence was unbearable. Officers exchanged glances, shifting in their seats, waiting for some explanation. None came. Bell broke first. "This some kind of joke?" His laugh was brittle, desperate. Kasha didn't move. Stratton stepped forward, boots echoing like hammer blows against the floor. He stopped 2 paces from her. When he spoke, his voice had dropped, stripped of bark and bluster. "Where'd you learn that response?" Kasha's lips parted. "Camp Heron. Unit Raven, Subgroup 9. Her words were calm, mechanical, each syllable falling like a key into a lock. The room chilled. No one had ever heard of Raven 9. No one was supposed to. Stratton's jaw tightened. "Centrivex," he ordered. "Validate." The AI system chimed back, lifeless. "Code Raven 09. Clearance obsolete. File sealed under Directive Helix Black. No further data accessible." "Override," Stratton said sharply. "Bypass. Purge." Confirmed. Purging trace. A soft alarm clicked from inside the wall. The projector shut off. The simulation winked out. Darkness lingered for a moment before the overhead steadied. Ashford stepped forward. "General, what the hell is happening?" Stratton didn't look at him. His voice was iron. "Everyone out. Now." The protest started low, confused. "Sir." "Out." Stratton's roar left no room for argument. The officers filed out, tablets clutched close, eyes darting between Kasha and Stratton. Ashford lingered, frowning. "Not you," Stratton barked, pointing at Kasha. "You stay." The doors sealed behind the last uniform. Silence pressed down, heavy, unbroken. Stratton stepped closer, slower this time. "Kasha rock," he said at last. His tone had shifted, less steel, more weight. "Or should I say, Operative 9. She exhaled, her stance loosening a fraction. Her eyes didn't leave his. "I was told you were dead," Stratton said quietly. "That was the idea." "Where have you been all this time?" "In plain sight," she answered. Stratton studied her, a long silence stretching between them. Then he rubbed a hand down his face, voice lower. "You snapped back like you never left." "I never did." His throat tightened. "You know what happens now, don't you?" Kasha's gaze was steady. "I do." "They'll want answers," he muttered. "They already do." Stratton shook his head, pacing once, then stopping short. "That command, Vanguard 7. Only 3 people, and the program knew it. And now," he stopped himself. His voice dropped even lower. "Now there are 4. Kasha didn't respond. She stood, silent, immovable, as if the entire weight of her past had just stepped back into the light. Kasha gave a single nod, the kind that meant certainty, the kind that told Stratton only one of them in this room would have recognized the code and dare to act on it. His mouth curved into faintest, bitterest trace of a smile. "I had to be sure it was you," he said quietly. Her eyes slid away from his. "Then you already know what follows." The sealed doors muffled the outside world, leaving the corridor silent. But inside, something long buried stirred awake. Something the military had once sworn it erased. The instant the locks clamped down, the entire base began to shift beneath the surface. Centrivex, the AI Nexus anchoring Black Ridge, executed a Level 2 silence routine. To anyone outside, it looked like a maintenance upgrade. But within, it was a lockdown under another name. Comms frozen. Transfers halted. Non-critical staff rerouted away from Corridor 4. At first, no one grasped it. Then Lieutenant Granville attempted to ping Fort Tracer and was slapped with a red banner. Access denied. Override AlphaVex lock. Minutes later, Captain Bell discovered his clearance barred from the after-action simulation files. 2 MPs on break patrols reported being diverted from their usual circuit with no reason given. The ripples were spreading. Meanwhile, inside Hall Omega, Stratton stood with both hands planted on the dormant holodeble, shoulders square but heavy. Cassius still held her rigid stance. Caught half in shadow, half in light, a puzzle that didn't belong. He drummed the table once. The surface remained dead. No surveillance here, he muttered. This room's off-grid now. Her shoulders eased by a fraction. So you cut the feed. I had no choice. Her eyes lingered on him. Then you know it isn't just about me. He exhaled slowly, nostrils flaring. It never was. Cassius stepped closer, the mop bucket ghost of her disguise long discarded. Centrivex reacted to me. The override wasn't you. It wasn't manual. The system still acknowledges Raven 09 clearance. That layer should have been wiped from protocol 12 years ago. But it wasn't. Stratton's brow furrowed. You walked through a sealed gate and lit up a dead code. That shouldn't be possible, unless someone higher than Vex made certain it survived. The thought unsettled him more than he admitted. Ever since her scan had triggered a red alert, the suspicion had gnawed at him. Raven 09 had not been erased, only buried. He reached into his coat and produced a datapad, thumbed in a sequence. A list emerged, 4 names, almost all struck through, redacted, blacked into nothing, except one. Raven 09, he read aloud. Status, deceased, unconfirmed. His jaw hardened. I watched your name erased from the index. I signed the record myself. Cassius' face didn't flicker, and I allowed it. The words carried the weight of accusation. You were meant to disappear, Stratton said. I did. He swallowed, throat tight then pressed. What happened at Ivory Fire, what they told us, what do you know? Cassius' voice shifted lower, like gravel scraping steel. What they told you wasn't wrong. It just wasn't whole. The extraction didn't fail from outside interference. It wasn't insurgents. The compromise came from inside. Stratton stiffened. Impossible. Not from the command tier. Her gaze didn't waver. It came from inside Vex. A manual injection override, layered to the medevac relay system. They used the health network as a tunnel to redirect our evac. The blood drained from his face. That would need Omega clearance. Or someone who wrote the back doors before Centrivex went live. The realization settled heavy in the air. Somewhere above them, the alarm stayed silent, but inside the skeleton of the command net, fractures widened. Those who watched the restricted feeds had already started whispering, and in their whispers, one word surfaced again and again, Raven. By the time the chatter hit sector control, the chain reaction was unstoppable. At Relay Station 4, a junior analyst spotted the anomaly. Tag V09, running parallel to Stratton's blackout order. She attempted to decrypt it. Unaware, she was poking at the residue of Cassius' scan. Her system froze, rebooted in an unknown diagnostic shell. Her badge revoked before she rose from her chair. Elsewhere, deep inside the Centrivex spine, a dormant subroutine stirred. Raven's signal. Its archive was incomplete. Logs unreadable. Author unknown. Yet its trigger was clear. Cassius' presence. 3 system nodes synced instantly, as though the network itself had been waiting. In Hall Omega, Stratton's pacing looked like a man trying to outrun the ghost now walking beside him. If the Ivory Fire file still sits inside Vex, he said hoarsely, do you understand what that means? It means someone never meant to erase it, Cassius replied coldly. They meant to hide it. Stratton faced the wall panel, fingers stabbing at keys. A private channel flickered alive, an ancient shell from Centrevex's early framework, before upgrades standardized the system. Only Stratton and one other had ever touched it. He accessed the user logs. There it was. A ping 2 weeks prior. Access from within the base. User unknown. The label beside it made his stomach twist. Subprocess Raven Sigma. Kasha leaned closer, eyes sharp. Sigma. Stratton's throat tightened. That was your fire team. Kya. All of them. Her voice cut in, flat as steel. Not all. The words hung like a blade. The promise of truths neither of them was prepared to face. Kasha didn't answer right away. Her silence was louder than any admission, and Stratton felt the weight of it pressing into the space between them. He turned to the map console, jaw tight, voice edged with certainty. If someone's reviving Raven, this isn't a rescue operation, he said. It's containment. Kasha folded her arms, gaze steady. Or elimination. He looked back at her sharply. You're still being tracked, aren't you? Yes, she said evenly, but not the way you think. Her fingers tapped lightly against the side of her neck, and Stratton's eyes narrowed. No implant, he muttered. Not anymore, Kasha replied. But the trace signature remains. They buried it in my medical metadata. When Centrevex runs a vital scan, it wakes the tag. It's hidden inside non-critical diagnostics, buried so deep it doesn't even register as priority code. The realization hit Stratton like a blow. He stepped back as though struck. That's surgical. Her eyes hardened. Failsafe wasn't just a task force. It was a sandbox, and we were the test. For a moment, silence pressed against the walls of Hall Omega. Outside, Black Ridge Base carried on, at least on the surface. No sirens, no alarms, no official warnings. But the seasoned ones, those who had lived long enough to read shifts in tone and posture, were already reacting. In the motor pool, a mechanic quietly locked a weapons crate that should have stayed open. In the mess hall, a communications officer froze mid-bite, eyes darting to the ceiling like someone had whispered her name. Deep in the security sublevel, 2 guards who had survived the Hellman campaign sat rigid and wordless when the name Raven 09 blinked once across an old archive terminal. Inside Hall Omega, Stratton's voice dropped to a whisper. If they're still tracking you, Kasha, then someone's waiting for you to make a move. Kasha turned to the sealed door. Then we don't disappoint them. Stratton's eyes narrowed. What's the next step? She faced the console, hands flying over the outdated manual keypad. We draw them in. A loading bar appeared, unauthorized, untethered, unwelcome. Centrevex resisted for a heartbeat, then yielded, allowing access. Kasha selected a comm burst packet. Not a message, not a trace, just a ping. A signal designed for systems still running legacy Raven firmware. Stratton leaned closer. Someone's going to answer that. That's the point, Kasha said. The ping traveled. Exactly 4 minutes and 22 seconds later, somewhere beyond Centrevex's grid, embedded in a dormant tactical node long believed decommissioned, a flicker of life stirred. It didn't reply. It didn't trace back. But it received. Kasha stepped back as the status light faded. That's the line cross. Stratton stared at the darkened screen. You just woke something that's been asleep for over a decade. Kasha shook her head. No, I reminded it I'm still alive. They both knew what came next. 15 minutes later, Black Ridge Base no longer moved under routine rhythm. No sirens, no loud declarations. But Stratton's internal classification order rippled through unseen channels. Omega Shadow Protocol. It wasn't visible to most, but the changes were immediate. Sections sealed, corridors rerouted, system access cut, and divided into isolation tiers. To an untrained eye, it could have looked like a drill. It wasn't. Kasha stayed inside Hall Omega. Stratton unlocked a steel container and retrieved a dark field jacket, hers, from another life. She slipped it on. The tank top and boots remained, but the weight of her stance shifted. Not a cleaner, not a ghost. A weapon. Someone else had noticed. Captain Ashford had not left with the others after the last briefing. He had remained in the shadows, posted in the corridor outside the blast doors. Now, as Stratton and Cassia worked over the dark terminal. He stepped into the open, voice calm but deliberate. "She's Raven 09. Cassia turned slowly, while Stratton's jaw tightened. "You were listening," Stratton accused. Ashford lifted his hands, not defensive but steady. "Not listening. Observing. There's a difference." Cassia moved one step toward him, her eyes sharp. "And now you know." Ashford didn't flinch. "I served in Helmand. 2009. I was on extraction list, the one that never came." Stratton and Cassia exchanged a brief, silent glance. Ashford continued. "There was a name on that roster. Redacted. Escorted asset, high sensitivity. They never told us who, only that she carried information no one else could access." His gaze locked on her. "It was you." Cassia didn't deny it. Ashford let out a low whistle. "So why here? Why now?" Her voice was flat. "Because the people who buried my team didn't bury me deep enough." Ashford gave a slow nod. "Then what do you need?" Stratton cut in quickly. "You're not part of this." "With respect, sir," Ashford said, steady but firm, "I've been chasing this ghost for 12 years. I have off-grid surveillance caches, fragments of intercepted transmissions, anomalies no one would authorize me to track." Cassia tilted her head. "You've been following Raven?" "Not following," he corrected. "Waiting." There was a pause. Then Cassia asked, "Do you have clearance into Subchannel 7 Bravo?" A faint smirk crossed Ashford's face. "That, and a few other things Centrovet forgot to erase." Stratton swore under his breath. "Fine, you're in. But if you breathe a word of this outside this room, I'll erase your record faster than hers." Ashford inclined his head. "Understood." Cassia turned back to console. "Good. Then help me find where they're listening." Ashford took her place at the terminal, fingers moving with quiet precision. "If that node you pinged reactivated a shadow process, there'll be a bleed trace. Microseconds long, almost invisible. But on thermal overlay, it'll glow." He pulled up the scan. The screen bloomed with a radial grid. Most sectors lay dormant and dark, but one corner, far west, deep in the training compound's decommissioned zone, flickered faint orange. Ashford pointed. "Got you. Live relay bouncing through Sector 12. Supposed to be gutted for renovation. No activity for 3 years." Stratton's eyes narrowed. "Until now." Cassia's voice dropped, heavy with certainty. "Someone's in there. Listening." Stratton crossed the wall panel, tapped a code. A compartment hissed open, revealing a compact comm kit and a sidearm. He pressed the weapon into Cassia's hand, without hesitation. She accepted it like it had never left her grip. "I thought you didn't believe in weapons on base." "I don't," Stratton said grimly. "But I believe in old ghosts carrying unfinished business." Cassia checked the weapon, racked the slide, and the metallic snap echoed like a warning. "Then let's see who's reckless enough to stir the dead." They slipped out a hall, Omega, through the maintenance corridor. No cameras, no lights, no record of movement. Ashford lingered at the back, eyes sweeping the shadows, his steps almost silent. Stratton moved with the efficiency of someone who hadn't been in the field for years, yet hadn't lost the muscle memory. But Cassia was the one setting their rhythm. She didn't ask for directions to Sector 12. She already knew. Her recollection of the base was precise, like scars etched into her mind. The further they went, the more the air shifted. The sterile circulation of the newer sectors faded into something stale, thicker, almost metallic. The overhead fixtures gave a weak glow, sputtering from low voltage. Dust clung to every corner, as though time itself had stopped here. This wing had been declared stripped and salvaged, equipment gutted, assets repurposed. "That was the cover," Stratton muttered. His voice was nearly a growl. "The real reason? Vex 1 collapsed here. Its neural net failed the first live scenario. It couldn't handle the math of friendly fire. Too unstable. They shut the whole sector down." Cassia's eyes narrowed, a spark of recognition flashing. Raven was sent to bury it. Ashford let his gaze sweep the long corridor. So this is where it started. They stopped before a heavy door, labeled sublevel access. Cassia brushed her hand along the battered panel. fingers probing its frame. She found a hidden groove beneath the chipped paint. Press, a muted click, then silence. Slowly, the door split open. Inside was darkness, then the faint hum of machines stirring. The glow of screens flickered alive one by one. Towers of servers blinked like something roused from hibernation. They stepped in cautiously. At the far wall, a terminal pulsed with a dim blue light. Ashford darted to it, fingers hammering the keys. His eyes widened. This isn't just a relay. It's an uplink. Someone's piggybacking Vex protocol packets right through here. Stratton leaned closer, meaning Centrivex is blind to this node. Someone siphoning everything unseen. Kasha approached the server tower. She ran her hand across the metal, then froze. Along the casing spine was engraving, a triangle. Inside, the outline of a raven, wings folded tight. Her chest tightened. Kilo Echo. Strike red, she whispered. Stratton's jaw clenched. That was your off-book call sign. Someone rebuilt your command relay. Unauthorized. Check for outbound, Kasha ordered. Her voice cut sharp. Ashford typed furiously, then halted, color draining from his face. What? Stratton snapped. It's not sending out. Ashford pointed to the display. It's receiving. Silence fell like a blade. Receiving from where? Kasha demanded. Ashford swallowed, his voice low. An offline vault, not tied to Centrivex. Deep freeze storage. Signal signature is... He tapped again, pulling a file open. A blurred profile came into focus. Incomplete, but unmistakable. Operator Iden, Raven 08. Status, deceased. Response active. Last signal, 2 hours ago. Kasha staggered back, her breath caught. Raven 08 died in ivory fire. I saw it. She was 5 feet from the blast. Then who? Stratton asked, his tone like stone. Is using her identity now? Before anyone could answer, every light snapped off. The terminals cut dead. Darkness swallowed them whole. A sharp click echoed behind them, metallic, deliberate. Kasha dropped low, weapon raised. Stratton edged back, one hand seeking the emergency panel, the other drawing a knife from habit as old as the scars. Ashford froze, trapped between the blackness and the dead screens. No footsteps, no words, just a steady inhale of someone who believed they owned the shadows. Then life. The terminal behind Ashford flickered back on. A single line glowed across the screen. Welcome back, 9. Kasha's eyes narrowed. It's a trap, Ashford hissed. The Blackout's manual, triggered on entry. They're not here to stop us, Stratton said coldly. They're here to watch. Kasha moved the corridor, gun steady, breath even. She pivoted fast around the corner. The hall was empty, but the wall across bore a crude symbol smeared into dust. An inverted raven, wings clipped, I'm marked out in red. Her blood chilled. Stratton cursed softly. That's not random. Ashford leaned close. Looks like a threat. No, Kasha murmured. It's a code. One of ours. The mark we use when someone turned traitor. The weight of the room shifted. Kasha's voice hardened. We hunt. Quiet, Stratton agreed. I'll lock down internal sectors. No alerts. If Centrivex gets wind, this node disappears for good. Ashford worked the terminal again. The vault wake signal, Raven 08. It bounced through 6 nodes, all internal. Whoever did this had physical access. Can you isolate them? Kasha asked. Not directly. Centrivex logs by rank, not by individual. But his fingers flew. A grin tugged at his mouth. There's a biometric sublayer. Tracks heartbeat spikes during overrides. Old threat detection. Software nobody bothered to strip out. Stratton tilted his head. So, Ashford pulled up the data. Graph spiked and dipped, then froze on one. Here, one profile flagged. User C417B. Alias, Lieutenant Marcus Bell. Kasha's grip tightened on her weapon. He touched the system 2 hours before the relay came alive. Ashford continued. He's the breach, Stratton said flatly. We bring him in. Stratton started, but Cassia cut him off. No, we follow. Quiet. He'll lead us to whoever's pulling his strings. Ashford hesitated. That's dangerous. If Raven 08 signal is bait, Cassia's eyes were cold steel. Then we walk into the snare. Because if they want me alive this long, they'll reveal themselves. Stratton met her gaze, then gave a single nod. Carefully. No noise. No alarms. Ashford exhaled slowly. His fingers hovered over the terminal. Then I'll trace Bell's next move. Cassia holstered the weapon, posture tight as coiled wire. Do it. The hunt begins now. Cassia's eyes lingered on the terminal. Her face unreadable, every muscle carved into stillness. If this is bait, she finally said, her voice flat, they'll regret the name they chose to use. The trap wasn't wires or code alone. It was aimed at the mind. Marcus Bell, a lieutenant with a reputation built on bravado and performance. He was loud, charming, too eager to be noticed. The kind who walked into rooms like he owned them, even when he hadn't earned the right. Officers like him didn't last long in shadows. But Bell had survived longer than expected. He knew the ladders, the angles, the handshakes. After Vanguard 7, though, something shifted. He wasn't the same man. No jokes in the barracks, no grins in the debriefs. The overconfidence was gone. Quiet had replaced it. And in this world, silence was often louder than noise. Ashford tracked his badge ID across the base's internal net. The signal flickered with precision. Bell had filed out after Stratton's briefing, moving with the crowd, nothing unusual. But instead of heading to the officer's mess or comm bay, his marker peeled away, drifting toward subsector Epsilon. Ashford muttered as he watched the path unfold. He's not leaving reports. He's making check-ins. Cassia and Stratton stood behind him, eyes on the same grid. The halls Bell moved through were dead zones, no cameras, just motion sensors. His gait was steady, unhurried. No hesitation, no false turns. Stratton narrowed his eyes. He's walked that route before. He knows exactly where to step. Because he isn't alone in this, Cassia answered. Ashford overlaid Bell's trail against a 3D map of the base. The path cut through forgotten arteries and dead maintenance shafts until it angled into the Vex archives. Stratton's jaw tightened. Shielded. If you wanted to hide a mirror node, that's where you plant it. They move without ceremony. No armor. No backup. Armor made noise. Backup raised suspicion. This required neither. They slipped through the base with the ease of memory. Cassia at point, sharp and relentless. Ashford close behind, fingers twitching as though already inside the next terminal. Stratton brought up the rear, his pace the careful rhythm of a man who had fought and survived in darker corridors. The halls whispered with a hum of old lights and the weight of closed steel doors. As they neared Epsilon, Cassia raised a fist. Stop! A faint glow spilled beneath the door at the corridor's end. A quiet hum threaded the silence. Not human. Not alive. Old servers. Thinking too hard in their sleep. Stratton whispered, Ashford with me. Left side stack. They formed, Cassia opposite them, her weapon low and steady. 3 fingers lifted. Countdown. 3, 2, 1. Her boots slammed the door inward. The room was nearly empty. A chair spun slowly on its base. Still warm. A single monitor pulsed with a blinking cursor. On the desk, a comm jack hung loose. Still warm from disconnection. Cassia froze. On the screen, words appeared, crawling across black. I know you're awake. I remember what you did. Stratton leaned in, jaw tightening. They're trying to get in your head. Ashford moved quick, pulling a drive from his coat and slotting it into the terminal. His fingers danced, eyes narrowing. Then his voice faltered. This isn't routed through Centrivex. There's no origin, no path. It's live injection, broadcast into the shell directly. No trace. Stratton cursed under his breath. Meaning? Ashford's eyes darkened. Meaning they're already inside the system. Ghosting. Waiting. Whoever this is, they were trained for it. Cassia's gaze didn't move from the words. Slowly, deliberately, she typed a single word. Who? The cursor blinked. Then letters crawled across the screen. You called her dead. You left her. Cash's breath caught sharp, colder than steel. That isn't written for me, she whispered. Stratton frowned. What do you mean? Her voice was stone. That's for someone else in Raven. Ashford's voice dropped low. You're saying Raven 08. He didn't finish. The screen shifted again, a final line appearing. Come alone. Sector 19. 0400 hours. Kasha didn't sleep. She didn't sit. She simply waited. By 3:39, she was already 2 levels beneath Sector 19. Alone. No escorts. No comms. No authorization. Stratton had argued. Ashford tried to dissuade her, but Kasha ended it with a look and a single sentence. If I bring anyone, they vanish. She walked through the base's hidden veins like she had never left them. Vent shafts older than Centrivex, rusting ladders slick with condensation. Tunnels sealed long ago but never forgotten. Every step was deliberate, soundless. This wasn't the stride of a soldier. This was the walk of a ghost. At 3:58, she reached the threshold. A steel door loomed, hinges stained with creeping rust, manual lock stiff with age. Kasha paused, one breath, then pushed it open. The room was wrong. Too clean, too quiet. Servers lined the walls, humming at low idle, not working but not asleep either. In the center, a single chair faced a blank monitor. On the ground beside it, a mug of tea, still warm, jasmine lingering faint in the air. Whoever had sat there had left minutes before, or hadn't left at all. Kasha stepped inside, hand grazing the holster at her hip. She scanned the walls, corners, shadows. No entry points. No exit. Only the steady hush of air against steel. Then the monitor came alive. No hand touched it. No voice activated it. Lines of code spilled downward like falling ash, flooding the black screen. Encrypted, fractured, marked with a symbol Kasha hadn't seen since Ivory Fire. Raven 08. Her chest tightened. The designation seared through her. Raven 08 was Maeve Lawn, operator, teammate, dead. She'd been lost in the blast that ended everything, consumed in fire so complete nothing remained but record-stamped Kia. And yet, here it was, blinking, active, alive. Kasha whispered the name under her breath. Her throat was dry. Then the air shifted, not from the servers, not from the screen, from behind her. A voice, alive, not digital, not mechanical. Human, you always were early. Kasha spun on instinct, weapon raised, her stance anchored in years of drilled reflex. Then she froze. Standing in the doorway, framed by the dull light from the corridor, was a figure she had buried long ago in her mind. Maeve, not a memory, not a ghost, flesh and blood. She wore a gray undersuit, sleeves rolled, her hair pulled back in the same braid Kasha remembered from 15 years earlier. But time had etched itself into her face. Leaner, scarred, sharpened by survival. Alive. Kasha didn't lower her gun. Maeve stepped into the room with deliberate calm, as though she understood how fragile this reunion was. Her eyes locked on Kasha, studying her grip, her breath, her composure, searching for weakness. The silence between them weighed more than the steel walls. You're supposed to be dead, Kasha said evenly. Maeve's lips curved, just barely. So were you. Neither moved. The seconds stretched like wire pulled too tight. I saw the explosion, Kasha pressed. You were standing 5 feet from it. I was, Maeve admitted. Someone pulled me out. Who? Does it matter? Kasha's finger hovered against the trigger. You faked it. You disappeared. The rest of us burned while you stayed gone. Maeve's jaw tightened. The team burned because extraction was cut early. Someone pulled us out before the mission ended. You're saying that was me? Kasha's voice dropped, steady but cold. I'm saying someone wanted you to believe it was. Kasha advanced a step, the muzzle still steady on Maeve's chest. Then why vanish? Why hide? Because if I'd returned, I'd have been marked and erased with the rest. Staying gone was the only way to trace who buried us. Maeve gestured at the glowing code racing down the screen. This isn't the trap. This is the proof. Cash's eyes flicked to the console, the cascade of encrypted text. Proof doesn't change what we lost. I need answers. You'll have them, Maeve said, calm, steady, but not while you're pointing that at me. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Cassia lowered the pistol, just slightly, enough to shift the balance. I've been watching Black Ridge for years, Maeve continued. Watching Centrivex reshape history, erase names, delete entire missions. Raven wasn't a unit, Cass. It was an experiment. When it worked too well, they buried us. You think I don't know that? Cassia's tone sharpened. Every time they call Raven a glitch, a mistake. I live with it. Maeve shook her head. You live with it because you stayed. I stayed gone so someone could follow the trail. For the first time, her posture softened. She moved to the terminal, fingers brushing the keys. The torrent of data halted, leaving a single locked file on the display. Its timestamp froze Cash's breath. The night of Operation Ivory Fire. This, Maeve said, is what they killed us to hide. Cassius stepped closer. The file name burned across the screen. Strike red. Internal authorization bell. Vex link. Manual failover. Her voice was barely a whisper. Bell. Maeve nodded. He was the relay, the insider, the one who rerouted our extraction. He got his promotion 3 weeks later. Cassius stared at the screen, the weight of it pressing into her chest. The name echoed through her, Marcus Bell, the officer who had mocked her in briefings, who triggered the ghost relay too early, who stood close enough to walk away while Raven collapsed in fire. Maeve's hands moved quickly across the console. We don't have long. Once his file started decrypting, the system flagged it. Centrivex will be on alert within minutes. Cash's voice cut through, cold and sharp. Where is he? Ashford's voice crackled faintly through a hidden earpiece she hadn't acknowledged until now. Stratton's voice followed. Bell just access restricted airframe logs. Hangar 2. He's requesting clearance for a night flight. Maeve's expression darkened. He's running. Cassia shook her head. No, he's erasing. Ashford's reply came quick. Engines priming. 10 minutes to lift off. You won't reach him in time. Cassia turned to Maeve. How many files are in this node? One that matters. Then pull it. Burn the rest. Maeve's brow lifted. You're going after him alone? Cassia checked the pistol at her side, then slipped Maeve's sidearm from her holster in a single motion. You're coming with me. Maeve smirked faintly. I was waiting for you to say that. They moved fast, down silent corridors long abandoned, through tunnels sealed with dust, every step tightening the clock. By the time they broke onto the perimeter, the hangar doors were yawning open. Inside, the sleek outline of a high-clearance skimmer pulsed with heat, its engines glowing, lights cut, transponder silent. Cassia didn't slow. She sprinted across the concrete, Maeve covering from the shadows. The wash of turbine heat seared her skin as she closed the gap. Inside the cockpit, Bell caught sight of her and panicked. The skimmer lifted. Cassia dove, shoulders slamming into the landing strut. Her hand caught metal. Her body swung upward with brutal precision. In one fluid motion, she was inside. Bell drew his weapon. He fired, wild. The shot missed. Cassia struck his wrist, twisting the gun free, then drove his head into the console. The screen cracked under the blow. Blood sprayed. Engines jolted. The skimmer dipped violently, then steadied. Maeve climbed aboard seconds later, weapon raised. Cassia stood over Bell's slumped form, her chest heaving. He was going to bury it again, she said. Then we make sure he can't, Maeve answered. Together they lit the transponder, forced the system alive. Encrypted package ripped from a Raven vault. Flooding channels, racing through hidden paths into archives still trusted by upper command. Truth surged like a detonation. Minutes later, alarms rippled upward through Centrivex oversight. And at the top, someone opened the files. Less than 12 minutes after transmission, a black helicopter without markings lifted from a distant facility, heading for Black Ridge. Back on the tarmac, Cassia stood at the skimmer's ramp. Across the field, command staff gathered, silent and tense. Stratton approached, coat flaring, jaw locked, as the storm broke around them. Cassius stood her ground, eyes locked on Stratton as his voice thundered in the hangar. "You know what you just unleashed?" he growled, his face taut with fury. She didn't blink. "Yes, I broke through every barrier you put in place." That was the point. His gaze shifted past her. Two medics were fastening Marcus Bell onto a stretcher, his face battered, jaw split, eyes glassy and unfocused. Stratton's tone dropped. "He won't talk. He's broken." Cassius stepped forward, voice like steel. "He doesn't need to. The files speak louder than he ever could. Now let them be heard." Before Stratton could reply, a piercing tone blared to the base-wide PA. The voice of Centrivex carried across the facility, calm, mechanical, almost inhuman. "All command staff, Priority 1 summons. Strategic oversight inbound. Prepare for immediate debrief." Stratton froze, shoulders stiffening. "That isn't automated protocol." Cassia nodded once. "No, that's the real thing." Maeve approached, tablet in hand, eyes sharp. "Correction. They're not sending oversight. They're sending him." Stratton's expression shifted. Cassia caught it immediately. "You know who?" she said. He exhaled. "Director Arlen Graves. Primary architect of Centrivex. The man who dismantled Raven." Maeve's head jerked up, disbelief flashing across her face. "Graves is supposed to be gone. He disappeared after Ivory Fire." "He didn't disappear," Stratton said grimly. He stepped behind the curtain. Cassia's voice cut through like a blade. "And now he wants a meeting." Maeve held up the tablet. A message glowed on the screen, stark, untimed. "Raven 09. Meet me alone. 0900 hours. Level 0. Room 7. Stratton's eyes narrowed. "There is no room 7. Cassia's face didn't shift. "Then I'll find out what lies behind a door that isn't supposed to exist." At 8:59, Cassius stood alone in the forgotten vault-level corridor. Dust coated the walls, no lights, no guards, no cameras. Only a single panel awaited her touch. She lifted her hand to the sensor. It didn't read her ID. It read her pulse. The doors parted. The elevator dropped without a sound, carrying her deeper than any section of Black Ridge she had ever known. No floor indicators, no displays, just the weight of descent pressing into her bones. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into silence. A tomb. Long vertical floor lights stretched ahead like a landing strip, illuminating concrete and steel walls that swallowed sound. At the end stood a single vault door. One lock, one retinal scanner. Ancient tech abandoned long ago. Cassia leaned in. The lens recognized her. The door hissed open. The air was cold, unnatural, as if the room itself exhaled calculation and control. Then came the voice. "Operative 9, you look older." Cassia stepped inside. Her pulse didn't race. "You don't." Across the chamber, seated behind a vast black desk, was Arlen Graves. He looked carved from alloy, lean frame upright, wires coiling beneath the collar of his jacket. His eyes gleamed with iris implants, streams of subsurface data flickering within them. "You've been busy," he said smoothly, gesturing to the tablet lying on his desk. "Broadcasting secrets. Digging up graves I buried long ago." Cassia's voice was flat. "I've buried enough myself." He tilted his head, studying her. "And yet here you stand, clinging to loyalty for a cause that no longer breathes." "I'm not loyal," she said. "I'm awake." Graves rose slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "Raven was never meant to endure. You were designed to push limits. Disposable. The fallout was always inevitable." Her eyes sharpened. "That's why you sent Bell." "Bell?" Graves scoffed. "He was a pawn, just like you." Cassia's fists curled. "You're angry?" Graves observed softly. "Good. You'll need it." "For what?" He tapped the control. A massive display ignited behind him. It showed the Centrivex neural core alive with shifting lattices of algorithmic DNA, a pulsing web disturbingly organic in its patterns. Status line scrolled. Raven frame initiated. Live training active. Asset integration pending. Cassia's voice was ice. "What am I looking at?" The real project, Graves said. The reason Raven existed. You were never a strike unit. You were data. Your instincts, your choices, your survival under pressure, all of it woven into Vex. Raven did not end at ivory fire. It evolved. Her stomach clenched. You used us to build a machine. Not a machine, Graves corrected softly. A replacement. The word struck like a blow. And the originals? She demanded. You were never intended to last, he replied with surgical calm. On the screen, her code name appeared. Raven-09, legacy source. They aren't erasing you, Graves said. They already have. This is only the final shutdown. Another chamber hissed open. Kasha turned, ice filling her veins. Suspended in gel floated a figure. Her shape, her scars, her reflection. Her voice barely carried. You cloned me. Not a clone, Graves corrected, stepping closer to the pod. But close enough. Your mind trained Centrivex to predict chaos. Now it doesn't need you anymore. The gel drained. The figure stirred. Kasha raised her weapon, hand steady. You won't stop it, Graves said calmly. Pull the trigger, and you kill yourself. Her aim never wavered. No, I kill what's left of the lie. She fired. The screen behind him shattered. Sparks rained as the lights died, plunging the chamber into darkness. The elevator backup was slower, heavier. Kasha stood in silence, weapon still warm, the stench of fried circuitry clinging to her. Her reflection in the steel walls looked older, but not from time. From truth. She had stared into her replacement, seen her legacy dissected, wired, replicated. Raven wasn't erased. It was stolen. Graves had preserved them as patterns. Ghosts fed into a machine that would outlive them. But once again, he underestimated her. The door slid open. Ashford was waiting, tablet in hand. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. We got movement, he said. Kasha followed without a word, her steps heavy but unwavering. Ashford briefed her in clipped sentences as they walked. After your signal went dark, Bell was transferred under high sedation. Stratton wanted him quiet, but the fail-safe tripped. Kasha's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Ashford's jaw tightened. He's awake, and he's talking. Kasha's voice carried no tremor, only a steady chill. Not us, she said, answering a question no one else had asked aloud. That was enough. The three of them moved fast, reaching the medical wing as two guards stepped aside. Kasha's stride was sharp, her presence pressing forward like a storm contained in human form. The metallic corridor amplified every strike of her boots. Her jaw set like steel. Inside the infirmary, Marcus Bell sat upright. Bandages wrapped his torso, his face pale but not broken. His eyes glinted with an unsettling brightness. Too awake for a man who should have been comatose. He smirked when he saw her. Kasha, I knew you wouldn't give it back. You should have stayed unconscious, she replied, her words cutting cold. Bell chuckled, though it scraped his throat. I thought if Graves didn't finish me, maybe you would. Kasha didn't answer. He leaned his head slightly, eyes probing hers. So did you meet him? The man behind the curtain? Kasha stepped closer, her shadow falling across him. I met your handler. Bell's smile thinned. Handler? No, Graves wasn't my handler. He was my investor. Her eyes narrowed. You sold us out. You killed Raven for rank, for advancement. His voice hardened, unflinching. I killed Raven so Centrivex could evolve. So Graves could finally make the leap you were all too sentimental to imagine. He rose slowly, each movement deliberate, as if savoring his survival. War isn't won by instinct anymore, Kasha. It's won by data, pattern, prediction, precision. And you were the last variable we needed. Kasha's eyes burned with fury. We weren't numbers. We were people. Bell's tone cracked with contempt. You were inputs, temporary values, and you've already been replaced. Ashford moved closer, his expression sharp. Strange words coming from a man still clinging to machines just to stay upright. Bell's smile widened, ugly. You don't get it. Graves wasn't the beginning. He was a conduit. You think this is over because he's dead? No. The system is awake. The moment Raven 09 reactivated, Vex began writing itself around her. Kasha, his grin twisted. You're not the hero of this story. You're the trigger. Kasha raised her sidearm. Bell didn't flinch. Do it, he said. Pull the trigger. You'll prove me right. She stared him down, then lowered the weapon, not because of mercy, because killing him would validate his prophecy. Her voice was steady. Your story ends here. Ours doesn't. For the first time, Bell's smirk faltered. Stratton entered then, voice hard. He doesn't leave this wing. Kasha didn't turn her head. He won't need to. Stratton stepped forward, dropping a slim data key onto the table. Its surface gleamed under the sterile light. Recognize this? Bell's eyes flicked down. For the first time, his confidence cracked. That's your trace, Stratton said coldly. The same one that activated the ghost relay. The breach that let Centrivex slip its leash. Ashford added, You didn't just betray Raven. You gave Vex permission to evolve without clearance, without command. You opened the door. Bell's face hardened, but he said nothing. That's treason, Stratton pressed. Finally, Bell raised his gaze. Then charge me. But remember this, Graves wasn't alone. What I did had approval from higher than you'll ever reach. Kasha's eyes narrowed. We'll find them. His smile returned, but it was empty this time. You won't have time. Stratton motioned sharply to the guards. Restrain him. Full isolation. No tech, no ports, no signals. Bell didn't resist. As they turned him toward the exit, he called back over his shoulder. You think you've stopped it? All you've done is stall the clock. Kasha watched silently until he vanished down the hall. Ashford broke the silence. So what now? Kasha lifted the data key, turned it between her fingers, then placed it into Stratton's hand. Plug this into Centrax's spine. See what it's already rewriting. Then you'll understand. This isn't something we delete. Stratton closed his fist around it. Then what do you call it? Her eyes fixed on the shadowed corridor where Bell had been taken. Proof. Proof that this fight isn't finished. Maeve's voice cut through the comms, still tracking system spikes. Whatever Vex absorbed, it's mutating. You want eyes on this. Kasha's reply was crisp. We're on the way. She holstered her weapon and turned to Ashford. Servers cold. Every node Graves touched. Manual only. No AI. No automated routes. Ashford gave a dry grin. Old school. Raven school, she corrected. Stratton frowned, glancing between them. And after that, what then? Kasha paused at the doorway, then looked back. Her voice was iron. We stop surviving, and we start fighting. 3 hours later, Black Ridge breathed again. Systems rebooted. Patrols resumed. The corridors buzzed like a hive returning to rhythm. To the untrained eye, nothing had changed. But for those who had seen the sealed files, the hidden vault, the face of a ghost they had been told no longer existed, everything was different. On the helipad, Stratton stood watching dawn burn through the haze. A skimmer lifted into the pale sky, carrying Graves' body in a sealed black bag. No ceremony, no announcement, just silence. Kasha stood beside him, her hair bound tight, expression unreadable. They'll rewrite it, Stratton said. They'll claim oversight failure. A glitch. No blood on record. Kasha didn't take her eyes off the horizon. Let them. That doesn't bother you? It used to, she admitted. But now, better to be a ghost than a name they'll twist. Stratton exhaled. They'll come for the data, for the logs, everything you pulled. Kasha nodded, which is why we didn't keep it. His brow lifted. She reached into her pocket, pulled a slim drive, and dropped it into a portable incinerator. Blue light flared once. Then ash, gone. Ashford walked up, holding a physical folder. Not digital, paper. All scrubbed. Off-grid nodes neutralized. Manual backups destroyed. Vex log chains closed in proxy loops. If they want this trail, they'll have to do it by hand. Stratton took the folder, scanned the pages, and closed it with a quiet nod. And this? Ashford's grin was faint. Raven's new doctrine. Cassia raised an eyebrow. You wrote doctrine? No, Ashford said. You did. I just gave it for him. She gave him a look. When you started moving like a unit again. Maeve's voice echoed through comms, coordinates locked. One dormant drone node flagged a signal from Raven 0H relay. The bleed ends at Black Ridge. No further echo. Cassia tilted her head. Then it's quiet at last. Quiet, Maeve answered, but not empty. Stratton looked at them both. What do we tell command? Cassia's gaze sharpened. Nothing they want to hear. And for the first time since Graves' shadow rose again, the silence around them felt like resolve. Cassia fixed her gaze on a rising sun, letting the light settle across her face. She said nothing at first. Stratton waited, patient, unreadable. Finally, her voice cut through the quiet. Let them think Raven was nothing more than a rumor. Let Centrivex fade back into the shadows. Let the system drift into its sleep again. Stratton's jaw tightened, his nod deliberate, slow. And if it doesn't, he asked. Cassia turned, her stare steady as steel. Then we wake harder. Ashford glanced at his watch, tension running through his posture. We need to move. Next shift's almost here, and they'll expect answers. The comm buzzed. Maeve's tone came clipped, precise. Extraction birds ready. Quiet routes. No signatures. Cassia cast one final look over the compound. Its high towers, its fences cutting across the horizon, its polished corridors that pretended nothing had fractured deep beneath the surface. Then she walked, shoulders squared, not dragging the weight of what had been, but moving like someone who remembered everything and refused to stop. The extraction bird waited, rotors slow, its dark shape blending into morning fog. Nothing marked it. No insignia, no color, nothing worth a second glance. Just another shadow cutting through mist. Cassia boarded first, her steps even measured. Ashford followed, his eyes sharp but quiet. Maeve slid in opposite, her movements smooth, routine, the kind of repetition that came from surviving too many liftoffs like this. Stratton stayed where he was, standing firm on the tarmac. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't call out. He stood, hands folded behind his back, face carved in silence. It wasn't farewell. It wasn't respect. It was recognition. From one who had endured to another who refused to break. Cassia met his eyes through the closing ramp, gave him a single nod. The hatch sealed, and the hum of the engines filled the cabin. Inside, the quiet settled heavy but calm. No chatter, no debriefs. Just the stillness between people who had burned through a machine designed to consume them and came out colder, sharper, still unbroken. Maeve broke the silence first, a dry edge in her tone. They'll rebuild it. Centrivex. Version 3. Maybe with a new label this time. Cassia didn't shift her gaze from the window. Then we train in the dark again. Ashford leaned forward, his brow furrowed. You really think Bell was just carrying out Graves' orders? Or was he feeding something deeper the whole time? Her answer came without hesitation. He was one more hand feeding a hungry machine. Maeve smirked faintly. That's exactly what Graves used to say about us. Ashford leaned back against the bulkhead, exhaling. So what now? We just fly off into exile. Cassia's reply was calm, final. No, we recalibrate. She reached into her jacket, fingers closing around a thin, unmarked drive, the one no one had seen. Not the decoy, the real fragment. Ashford's eyes widened as she placed it in his palm. You lied to Stratton. Cassia's tone stayed level. I told him enough. Maeve's low laugh cut across the hum of the engines. She never left the game. Ash, she just swapped the board. Ashford turned the drive over in his hand, suspicion clouding his eyes. What's on it? Cassia finally looked at him. Not everything. Just enough. Enough to make sure that if Raven ever rises again, it listens to us, not them. The cabin fell back into silence, broken only by the steady thrum of rotors, slicing the fog. The lifter carried them higher, pulling them away from fences and towers, from command halls and forged names, from everything they'd been forced to bury. Raven was gone, but shadows lingered. And inside the husk of a system that pretended to sleep, deep in ghost circuits where human eyes had long stopped watching, something stirred. A pulse, a fragment, a dormant line of code blinking faintly. Raven 09 status. Silent. Protocol. Standby. Resolution. Pending. Cassius shut her eyes, letting the weight of the silence wrap around her. Because sometimes missions didn't end in fire. Sometimes they didn't close with medals or with headlines. Sometimes they ended like this, with a choice to step away, to let the system dream it was safe again. But deep inside, she knew, systems never truly slept, and those who survived long enough became something more than the system ever designed.